the City of New Britain. Building hope together for a greater community.
Okay, we want to start this meeting to the Board of Water Commissioners on the presentation of the proposed reservoir. So if you could all take your seats. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for being here. This is a very important issue. This is something not to be taken lightly, and I appreciate that everyone is here to express their opinion and to listen. This is a very controversial issue. As you can see, we have a pretty big audience here, and we have to be very careful about what we do here. So anyway, I'm going to start off the presentation, and I'm going to be passing it on to the engineering firm that did the actual report, and we'll be addressing a number of issues that were brought up in the comments from the Council on Environmental Quality and the Water Planning Council. But first, I'd like to start. Okay. These are 5 points that I'm going to talk about. First is, why do we need to plan for the future? My first day here was December 1st, 2016. New Britain was suffering the worst drought that it had seen in 50 years. The first thing I did was enact a contractual obligation with the MDC to buy water from them. If you look at these two pictures, this one here is the New Britain Reservoir during the drought. If you look at this picture, this is Cape Town, South Africa last month. Droughts are coming. We know that 95% of the world's climatologists are telling us that we need to prepare for the future. We're going to have dramatic climate change. We need to get ready. We have to make decisions today to affect our future. All right. This proposed reservoir will give us an extra 2.3 billion gallons of water, which is the equivalent of over 230 days water supply. It's very important that we have that. Can't say enough that we need to make plans for the future. We know that the world is changing. We've seen it. We see drought going all over the world. We've seen it in Syria. We've seen it in South Africa. We've seen it in the United States. We really need to be prepared. The water quality of the water that will be used to fill this reservoir is coming from sources that are approved already. Sources that we've been using for hundreds of years, or 100 years. Most of the water will be coming from the Whites Bridge well field and pond station located in Bristol, which was built in 1923. It's an area that has an abundance of water during very wet times. It's a low spot, and we can use that water and bank it for the future. That water quality is exceptional, and again, we have been using it for years, and it is an approved source of water. Meets the definition of Class A water by the Department of Public Health. There are a number of benefits to the environment. Some people say that this is an environmental disaster building this proposed reservoir. I don't think so. Is there an environmental sacrifice? Yes. But are there benefits? There are benefits. By having a place where we can store water during periods of drought, we won't have to take water from those rivers in that Bristol supply, and we can allow the water to flow clearly down the stream and support the ecological health of those rivers. We can also promote better management of our resources by using this reservoir. We can balance our use from different parts throughout the state. There have been a number of proposals regarding the use of Lamston's Corner Reservoir, and we looked into that. The Lamston's Corner Reservoir is a proposal that was developed in the 1950s, but it is much more environmentally sensitive than what we have in this site. It would require a reservoir that would be twice as large and would destroy hundreds of acres of watershed land. It's also a site that's been listed on the National Diversity Database, which has a lot more sensitive environmental concerns than what we have at the site that's being proposed. The big thing is the need for the water. We will have a need for water. We know that, again, that climate change is coming. We have regulations that are coming to address those issues of stream flow in streams like the Coppermine Brook and the Fenton River. Those streams were dried up because people needed the water. They needed to get the water supply. Again, if we have a reservoir during the times of plenty that we can fill, we can leave those streams be and support the ecological health there. We also know that we can't gauge the effects of climate change. It can be anywhere between a reduction of 10% of our water supply, maybe even more. And again, this is going to be an issue that we're going to have to address and take plans, painstaking plans, to take care of now. We're going to have to focus on what we need. Our big concern is the future. We are okay now, but we did have a problem 2 years ago. We had to open up our reservoir, we had to close down our reservoirs and buy water from the MDC, and we had to take some important steps. And one of the things that we should really think about is what are we going to leave our children in the future? And on that note, I'm going to pass it on to Jim Erickson, who is the lead from Leonard Engineering, who was the lead engineering firm on this study. Thank you.
Okay, good evening. Thank you, Ray. Can everybody hear me? All right. Thank you very much, and thank you for coming out tonight. As Ray mentioned, my name is Jim Erickson. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut and vice president of Leonard Engineering. We're a civil and environmental engineering firm headquartered in Glastonbury, Connecticut. My personal background, a 1982 graduate of UConn. For the past 35 years, my specialty has been water supply engineering for cities and towns across southern New England. Our firm was one of 4 specialists hired by the city to complete the environmental study on the impacts of both expanding the Tilcon quarry to create the reservoir and the future drinking water reservoir itself. I'd like to give a special welcome to the residents of New Britain. This is your water system. This is your future. Thank you for your interest in the project. With that, I'd like to get moving on the presentation because we have a lot to cover. We'll try to hit the highlights. Our goal is to leave you in a better position, knowing more about the project, the benefits, as well as the impacts when we leave tonight. And as Ray mentioned, we'll talk about some of the comments that were provided by the state councils and address some of them in our presentation. When we first started the project in 2016, right? We were informed that, hey, the governor of Connecticut is on New Britain's dam announcing drought restrictions. And next to him is the DEEP commissioner. And so this is when the drought was near its peak, looking for major restrictions in 6 of the 8 counties of Connecticut. And some of the comments made by our governor, you can read them for yourself. I think the last one is most important. As you can see by the levels of the reservoir behind me, which was Shuttle Meadow, this reservoir is emblematic of some of the difficulties that we're facing as a state. So then and there, New Britain became the poster child for the drought. Following Governor Malloy were commissioners from different agencies, including the DEEP commissioner, Robert Klee. And if you look at his second sentence, it says, what we're seeing here is what the region's going to feel from a changed climate, and this is going to continue well into the future. So as scientists are saying, get ready, our state officials are saying, get ready for this. Now I'd like to give you a brief summary of the project and move and describe it. The proposed project summary. 10 years ago, the project was a 131-acre project to remove the rock and create a reservoir from the city's parcel. It's been reduced from that 131-acre footprint to approximately 72 acres, which helps preserve the ridgeline of Bradley Mountain, reduces impacts to critical wetlands, species of special concern, core forests, and provides a 1,000-foot minimum buffer between the project and neighboring residences. Presently, there's about a 700-foot buffer on the east between the quarry and residences in New Britain. The reservoir will be created by gradually clearing, excavating, and removing rock over a 35 to 40-year period. The stormwater generator will be captured within the footprint of the quarry itself. Therefore, nothing will run off the site. There will be no impacts to the waters leaving the site, no impacts to the West Canal, and no impacts to Shuttle Meadow Reservoir. The reservoir, as Ray mentioned, will be filled with the same sources that have been serving the city for years. It'll increase the storage capacity by 45% and increase system yield by 2 million gallons per day, which is equivalent of 35,000 people, a city or town. That's half the population of New Britain or a town the size of Glastonbury, Newington, or Southington. So it's a significant reservoir will be created as the project moves forward. And last but not least, the project will be constructed at little or no cost to city taxpayers. All right. Yeah, okay. The reservoir itself will be created through excavation by Tilcon. And the infrastructure needed to move the water.
Please.
Yeah. May I continue? Thank you. You guys will have, I would like to listen to hear your comments when I'm done. I look forward to it.
So this guy's not.
There's an officer outside.
Hey, don't talk. Who are you? Who is this guy? Are you part of the city? Are you part of the city? Yeah, so why are you talking? Are you selling too? Hey, no. You have to leave. I'll listen to this guy. Well, I'm not going to listen to the likes of you. Just don't talk.
So you know who you what? One
So who are you? What's your name?
cameras back up those
I don't like it. So people.
Okay, I'd like to keep, I know everyone has a place to go. We'll try to be brief. We'll try to get the points out and then give everybody a chance to express their opinion. To explain the last comment, the Tilcon company would be excavating the quarry and creating the reservoir. The intake structure, the pumps and the pipes to transfer water to and from would cost between $1 and $2 million. That will be part of whatever agreement between the city and Tilcon come to. So there'll be no net cost to the city taxpayers to create this reservoir. Getting back into the public act, the city was ordered to commission an environmental study by a third party acceptable to the Water Planning Council. The city selected a team of 4 firms led by our company, Lennard Engineering. Also with me tonight is Tie and Bond Engineers, Peter Gallant, their vice president, is here to speak. Davison Environmental is our project biologist. Unfortunately, Mr. Davison's away out of state on a family wedding. And then tonight, also WSP USA, Rob Good, one of their senior hydrogeologists, is here to talk about those impacts. The technical requirements of the act were listed as 6 primary items. Environmental impacts on hydrology, ecology, natural land resources, and wetland systems. Also, long-term water supply needs for New Britain and the feasible interconnected systems next to it. Likely safe yield increases, impacts on raw water quality, steps to minimize environmental impacts, and the permits to move this project forward. Now, just getting into here, the project is located in the southeast corner of Plainville. on a 131-acre parcel owned by the City of New Britain Water Department over here. The yellow line is the limit of excavation and clearing for the proposed project. It's approximately 72 acres of the 131 acres. Immediately north of the project is a parcel owned by the Tilcon Company, used as an active trap rock quarry, materials processing, and their office. Zooming out a little bit, we can see the project sites over here, I-84 over here to the north and west of the project, and Shuttle Meadow Reservoir about over 4,000 feet to the southeast, along with Plainville Reservoir, also known as Crescent Lake, 1,600 feet to the southwest. Once again, focusing on the project, people who are into hiking, is the topographic map showing the elevations. It ranges from a high of 660 over here on Bradley Mountain, and generally goes downhill from west to east, elevation of 430 on the eastern part of the parcel. Here's the excavation limits again, and key thing to see here, we are preserving the ridge line and a significant setback from the ridge line to our project. Approximately 600 feet on the south and 1,400 feet on the north. 44 acres of land will be preserved to preserve the ridgeland, the majority of the trails on the Metacomet Trail, and some of the critical wetlands that are in that site. One key part of this project will be additional open space parcels donated by the Tilcon Company. They've acquired parcels over the years adjacent to here, and these will be donated as open space to the three towns that they subside in. Very important to Ray and the Water Department is 132 of these acres are within the City of New Britain's watershed. So if they were to be developed, the project didn't move forward, and this acreage was to be developed, it would be a threat to water supply as far as the houses, the septic systems, the roads that would go in as a result of it. And here is the location of those parcels. The red line here is the watershed line. So to the east of the watershed line, these parcels are the drinking water watershed. And to the west of this line, they are outside the watershed. They are part of the 1,400-acre core forest that will be discussed later on. One aspect that the Water Planning Council asked us to show is how will a quarry be phased? Will it be done all at once? Are you going to clear cut it? Is it going to be done in phases? And also, will it contaminate the drinking water? And so we developed a series of slides to show how it will be done. The first one, this is taken from high above the existing Tilcon quarry here, looking to the south. So west is in that direction, east is in this direction. This is the expansion area that we show on our other figures. You can see Bradley Mountain and the 44 acres over here to be kept as wooded, and the 17 acres over here. Presently, when water falls on the quarry, say it falls over here on this ledge, it makes its way by gravity to the lowest part of the quarry and does not run off the site. Similar fashion, water will not run off the new site and contaminate the drinking water. At the end of year one, you can see a small area would be cleared, and this area here is lower than the surrounding area. So any water, rainfall that falls on it is not going to defy gravity and go into the drinking water system, but be self-contained. It's a self-contained excavation which prevents contamination of the runoff. There's year three. We'll go through these a little bit quicker. At the end of year 5, you can see we've removed trees from about half of that area, but once again have a self-contained excavation that does not run off into Shuttle Meadow Reservoir. At the end of year 9, a little bit deeper. At the end of year 20, we've removed all the trees from the area, but once again have a self-contained area which we're working. And you can see from here on down, we're not expanding horizontally, it'll be a vertically downward expansion to create the reservoir. It's at end of year 30, some more is there. At the end of the project between year 35 and 40, this is what the ground would look like. You would see the ledges. You would see the bottom of the reservoir over here, sloping from this side to that side, with a low spot somewhere over in this general area. Upon completion and creating a reservoir, water would fill that entire area to the 2.3 billion gallon capacity. The ledges themselves would be maintained as rock ledges, but the sloping areas here would be restored with a forest cover to enhance water quality and minimize future erosion. And then this just shows the overall footprint of the reservoir when we're done, about 40% on the city parcel and 60% on the Tilcon parcel. Not included in the 291 acres is the land to be donated for this portion. So in summary, future drinking water reservoir, 109 acres, maximum depth of 130 feet. We talked about the capacities and yield. We have a multi-level intake structure to optimize water quality, and we restore the site to minimize or maximize water quality. How will it be filled? Ray mentioned before, we're going to use existing sources, primarily the Whitesbridge surface supply during average and above average periods. As Peter Gallant from Ty and Bond will in his presentation discuss, the water quality is very comparable to both Shuttle, Meadow, and Wassel. Similar to current operations, pumping will cease when water quality is very high turbid. So if you have a very extreme flood, the water is dirty, we don't pump the water now, it wouldn't be pumped in the future. And very important to help preserve the environment, with the reservoir in place, the city can turn off the Whitesbridge sources during periods of low flow and help restore the documented low flow conditions on Coppermine Brook. Very quickly, this is a sort of schematic of the New Britain system. Shuttle Meadow Reservoir and the treatment plant are here. It has a branch to the west with Wassel, Walcott, and Hart's Ponds, and a branch to the north and west, which go into Bristol and Burlington. So the sources that currently fill Shuttle Meadow are Wigville Reservoir, the 2 well fields at Whitebridge, the surface pumping station at Whitesbridge, and they pump through a common pipeline, a 5-mile pipeline that discharges the West Canal and fill Shuttle. In the future, if the project is approved, during times when this reservoir is full and there's adequate water in the streams and then the wells, that water would be diverted into this proposed storage reservoir. So saying we're saving our money for a rainy day, here we're saving our rainy days for the hot, dry days in the future. And now I'd like to turn it over to Peter Gallant from Ty and Bond to talk about his part of the study.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you. So as Jim mentioned, we were asked to evaluate, once the reservoir is built and this 2.3 billion gallons of water is in it, will it be treatable by the New Britain water treatment plant? And we did that by looking at the expected raw water quality from Coppermine Brook, which is the Whitesbridge pump station that's going to be the primary supply to the reservoir, as well as some surface water sampling in the quarry itself, and comparing that to existing reservoir quality, and then also looking at the treatment that's available at the New Britain water treatment plant. So this graph shows water quality for common parameters of concern in each of New Britain's supplies compared to Coppermine Brook, which will be the supply for the new reservoir. As you can see, this is a pretty typical New England surface water supply. It's soft, low turbidity, low levels of metals, and low alkalinity. And more importantly, the Coppermine Brook supply is very similar to the Shuttle Meadow that's currently serving the plant. Those are average values. This is the same chart looking at maximum values over the data that analyzed. Again, Coppermine Brook, very similar to the other supplies serving the plant. We also looked at sampled an intermittent pond in the quarry itself. This will be a very small portion of the 2.3 billion gallons that goes into the reservoir, but we wanted to look at that as well. We looked at samples that were taken back in 2011 as a part of Tilcon's permit compliance, and then we took a sample last year ourselves, and these are the parameters that we looked at. Again, very typical of a reservoir system, nothing really of concern from a treatment perspective. Low organics, low solids, nitrate a little bit, maybe a little bit higher than you'd see typically in a reservoir, but not at a level of concern. Volatile or perchlorate was also looked at. That's a blasting chemical. It was not found in the sample that we took recently. Perchlorate is a previously used blasting chemical. It's not used anymore, won't be used in the future. So we can be comfortable that if it's not there now, it won't be, the expanded quarry operation won't add to perchlorate contamination potential. VOCs are volatile organic chemicals. Those are contaminants that can be easily evaporated. There were none detected there. There's a little confusion in the report and in the comments on the report where some of the lab's quality control samples that showed these low levels of VOCs were confused with the sample from the quarry itself. So I apologize for that confusion, but the sample from the quarry itself, the data is all in the report, didn't show any levels of volatile organic compounds or semi-volatiles or these nitroaromatics, which are also blasting related compounds. And then looking at, New Britain has a very advanced treatment system using advanced treatment processes. It's very capable of handling your typical man-made, typical natural things that would occur in water, organics, particles, microbials. It's very well equipped to handle all of that. It's probably one of the more advanced treatment processes, treatment plants in the state in that regard. And also has some flexibility to handle other things that may come along in the future as well. The last thing we were asked to comment on was the noise and air potential from the operation post-development of the reservoir. And it's concluded essentially that there's won't be any material change, and the primary reason for that is that the air and noise generating activity is the processing plant more than the quarry, and that's not going to change. The location of the processing equipment is not going to change. The amount of material that they process isn't going to change. The permits that they have to operate under now for noise and air, the regulations and permits that they have to operate under now aren't going to change. So there won't be a material change expected in air or noise quality. In addition, the quarry, it starts out, it'll be about 25% further from any residence than the existing quarry is, and that quarry line just gets further from the residence as it goes. And with that, I will turn it back to Jim.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Once again, apologies from our wetlands biologist, Eric Davison from Davison Environmental, a previous commitment out of state. His firm has been in business 20-plus years, doing environmental studies for cities and towns, private entities, and conservation groups. Their task was to look at the wetland, wildlife, and forestry issues primarily with a quarry expansion, but also for the future reservoir creation. A scope of services was submitted to the state agencies reviewing this, both Water Planning and Council on Environmental Quality, and they actually asked for a few more things to be included, which the city obliged. Once we had those approvals, the study moved forward. The study consisted of a multi-season biological survey between August of 16 and September 17, the actual observations in all 4 seasons of the year. The site was evaluated for plants and plant communities, amphibians, reptiles, and birds, vernal pools, wetlands. The focus were on plants and animals most likely to be adversely impacted. They did a very thorough job there on site, dozens of times over a 12, 14-month period. Notable resources included were 8 vernal pools on the site, 10 wetlands, 10 of which were isolated, 2 that had streams that came out from them off the site. We found 3 state-listed wildlife species, Jefferson salamander, eastern box turtle, and spotted turtle, 1 state-listed plant species of fir club moss, 1 rare plant community on top of the precipice of Bradley Mountain, and we identified a bird habitat within the core forest. This is a map that was in our report, which we've modified a little bit. As I mentioned, there are 2 streams that leave the site. This is the major one here, which runs off the site into the West Canal and ultimately to Shuttle Meadow, and a second stream over here, a little smaller, that runs off into Shuttle Meadow. The size of the blue is a little deceiving because the streams themselves are between 1 to 3, maybe 4 feet wide, but these are actually wetland boundaries. So if there's wetlands that are 50 feet on either side of the stream, it gets a little bit wider on the graph. The small streams with wetlands adjacent to them. In addition, it shows isolated wetland pockets at different parts of the parcel. And the green are the vernal pools. I mentioned there was 8 of them on site that we identified. 3 of the vernal pools were found to be the most productive, vernal pool 1 and 2. And then also 3 have the most breeding grounds for the salamanders and turtles and the most activity. We're going to talk about mitigation measures in a little bit. One thing that the Water Planning Council asked for is what can we do to help mitigate the impact here? And if you look at this sort of magenta line, you used to call it purple, now it's called magenta to here, as well as this yellow line, that's the 72-acre excavation limit that's shown in the report. One thing that the DEP scientists, as part of the water planning, suggested is, can we preserve vernal pool 1 by providing a 100-foot setback and at the same time provide that setback for that rare and endangered fir club moss? So this shows a 65 or 66-acre excavation as opposed to 72. So it shows that by moving it here, we save another vernal pool. But as we'll talk about, the vernal pools are important, but the forest cover around them is equally important. So vernal pool impacts, we will be, 2 of the 8 vernal pools will be directly lost as part of the excavation. 4 of the 6 pools will be non-compliant with best management practices. By moving the line, we make them better, but we're still not compliant. If there's a bunch of people who took a site walk out there, we appreciate their time. If you went out there, you'll see the vernal pools are 75, one of the pools is 75 feet. This one about 75 to 100 feet from the edge of the quarry, and it's thriving. This one over here is about 200 feet from there. So we have vernal pools that are technically in non-compliant mode, but doing quite well on their own. And then if we go to the bird impact, bird studies were done on the site in accordance with the approved scope of work. The site is part of an interconnected core forest, totaling roughly 1,400 acres of uninterrupted forest. It supports a number of forest interior bird species identified as high concern, one of them being wood thrush. The project is going to result in 72 acres, based on the original plans, of forest habitat, or about 5% of the total forest. There's an effect I've learned about called the edge effect, which means adjacent to that, those are affected by the removal of there. So another 35 acres would be affected by the removal of this forest. Direct impact on wetlands, we're going to lose 4.7 acres of wetlands within the excavation. They include isolated wetlands as well as wetlands that feed other streams. And by removing those streams, we'll be drying downstream wetlands. Impacts on rare species, the plants, if we do move. Okay. The hydrologic effect, drying of the downstream wetlands, by removing the stream that feeds these, upstream of it, we'll be drying out some downstream wetlands as well. Now onto the rare species, we talked about plants, but if we move the line, which is a likely mitigation measure, we can preserve both rare and endangered plants on the site. By moving the line from 72 to 65 acres, we can preserve the 3 breeding pools for the Jefferson Salamanders. But we will also help the forest habitat. We're still not quite compliant. As far as spotted turtle, same thing as the salamander. We're saving the breeding grounds, but the forest around them where they live the rest of the year will be impacted. And box turtle, ironically, the area that's been logged by the water company and most disturbed is a habitat for the box turtle. And they will be impacted because that's the area which will be excavated. Proposed mitigation measures, if the project does move forward, a detailed mitigation plan would be developed as part of the permit process. Some things, off-site mitigation, looking at the 291 acres of donated land to develop resources there, as well as other sites that are applicable. Compensation fee paid to Audubon, Connecticut to help develop sites across Connecticut outside the region. Further potential reductions of the quarry. We looked at what happens when we reduce 6 acres, we help bring things closer to compliance. By making minor adjustments, things can get better. And last, minimizing loss of individual animals, such as the box turtle, by removing them to different areas and relocating them. So we don't, this is the biggest impact, the wetlands, the vernal pools, rare and endangered species, and birds. We don't deny it. There's a significant impact on the site. And the people who make the decision, the state legislature, needs to take this into consideration and balance that with the other positive things. So now I'd like to turn it over to Rob Good from WSP, as a project geologist, to talk about his part of the project.
Good evening. My name is Rob Good. I'm a senior hydrogeologist with WSP. I have over 37 years of professional experience, 29 of those years here in Connecticut. I also have worked on numerous mining projects, doing hydrogeologic impact assessments for abutters and mines, nationally and internationally. We were asked to do a hydrogeologic assessment to evaluate the potential impact of the quarrying and reservoir on groundwater and surface water resources. Specifically, what we were looking at was the hydrology impacts, or the impacts to water quantity, to groundwater wells in the area and to the surface water resources. Our assessment activities are listed here, but essentially what we did was we developed this conceptual model of the hydrogeology. Then we applied that model to evaluate the hydrology of the groundwater and surface water resources and to make a qualitative assessment of potential impacts. The geology of the study area is very well understood. It's been studied to death. There's plenty of publications and information out there, and we've worked all through the Central Valley looking at the geology. Basically, the bedrock geology is layers of basalt, which is a fine-grained extrusive igneous rock, and fine to coarse-grained sedimentary rocks. The primary rock units in the area are the Holyoke basalt, which kind of covers this whole area and is being mined by the quarry. It's underlain by the Shuttle metal shale, the Talcott basalt, and then the New Haven Arcos out here in the valley. And all of this geology has recently been imprinted with glacial deposits. Over the area of the mine, there's a thin veneer of glacial till, which is a low permeability sediment. And then in the valleys, Quinnipiac Valley, you have thicker deposits of sand and gravels. This is a cross section which gives you a better kind of sense of that layering within the study area. This is looking to the east, the left is north, the right is south. And it shows the existing quarry area, and then the New Britain parcel over here where the reservoir would be expanded into. That's the kind of the dashed outline of the reservoir, and then the proposed water level. So you can see that layering of the Holyoke basalt on top, Shuttle metal shale underneath. And these units have been faulted, but they're generally flat-lying 5 to 20% slopes. 20-degree slopes. The groundwater in this bedrock unit principally exists along fractures and faults and bedding planes. It's not in the matrix of the rock, except in some of the sedimentary rocks where they're a little coarser, you might get some water in there, but most of the water in this area moves along these faults and along bedding planes. The groundwater configuration generally follows topography. Groundwater flow follows topography. And the permeability of these layers are very low. The sediments are a little bit higher permeability, but the basalts, the Holyoke and the Talcott, are very tight units, not a lot of permeability. So looking at the groundwater resources, we did a well inventory survey within 1,500 feet of the parcel boundaries for the Tilcon parcel and the New Britain parcel. And that's shown in this red line around here. And within that area, there's 661 properties. 67 of those properties are potentially served by water or are documented to be served by water supply wells. And those are shown by the dots, kind of distributed around here. 5 over in New Britain and the rest in Plainville and Southington. Most of those wells are in this northwest area relative to where the reservoir would be located on the Britain parcel and to the west. And if you look back at the geology, those areas are really where the Shuttle Metal Shale is located, and they're probably drilled down into the Talcott basalt which underlies it. But they're stratigraphically below the Holyoke basalt, which is important to the impact evaluation. So we determined that there's no significant impact to the groundwater resources, primarily because of the separation distances. If you look back, the separation distances from the proposed reservoir area is 2,000 to 5,500 feet, a little bit closer to some of the wells that are already kind of close to the existing quarry. And then the stratigraphic separation, that the wells are completed below the Holyoke, the hydraulic conductivity, which is relatively low, which limits the potential for impacts, and the absence of a consumptive water loss here. There's a chance, good chance, that the reservoir will actually increase the water supply in the bedrock aquifer. To look at the surface water resources, we use this basin map, and the major line that runs through the center here is a basin divide between the Connecticut Major Basin and the South Central Coast Basin. The reservoir exists essentially within the Connecticut Major Basin, and surface water features in this basin include the Shuttle Meadow Reservoir, East Canal, West Canal, and then those surface water features that were identified in our study, including this water course that's south of the parcel. And this is a close-up of the Davison map showing the mapped resources. As part of our study, we went out and collected field measurements of surface water levels, groundwater levels, stream flows between November 2016 and June 2017 at points that are indicated here in red. And when we looked at all of that data combined with our research, we determined that the hydrology, the source of the water for these surface water features, is principally stormwater runoff or direct precipitation. The hydro period of some of these wetlands and vernal pools may be extended by some groundwater discharge, but that's really only in areas where the till sediments that we talked about are thicker, where there's still groundwater in the till and it's able to bleed out into those surface water features. So because whoops. I think I'm missing some slides here. Yeah, well, I'm missing some slides. I apologize for that. Because the hydrology is primarily related to surface water runoff, we did a drainage basin analysis for each of these surface water features where we mapped the intricate drainage basins and looked at the areas before the reservoir would be constructed and after the reservoir would be constructed. And based on that, we were able to estimate potential impacts. And we determined that there will be no significant impact to Shuttle Meadow Reservoir, to the East Canal, to the water course that is to the south, to the south of the parcel. And then to Vernal Pools over here on the west side and the south side. There's going to be obviously significant impact with the loss of everything within the footprint of the reservoir. All those surface water features are gone. And the other potential impact or realized impact is the loss of drainage basins that contribute to the water features off to the east and a little bit, well, that wetland area here and that area over here. And that's essentially the results of our study. Jim? I'm sorry about the slides.
I apologize for those slides being missing. Might get us to the question and answers a little bit quicker. Now I'd like to move on back to the water demand and engineering part of the project. Part of the tasks identified by the Public Act was to determine population growth and water demand projections for the city. The city currently serves about 75,800 population with customers in 5 towns: New Britain, Newington, Plainville, Berlin, and Farmington. In addition, the city has 4 sale for resale connections which sell water at much higher volumes to 4 other water companies that abut us: Kensington Fire District, Berlin Water Control, Bristol Water Department, and Valley Water Systems. We did a brand new evaluation. We looked at the old water supply plans, but updated them with new data provided by the Water Department for the study, and came up with a 20,015 average daily demand of about 9.39, roughly 9.4 million gallons a day, which is the direct customers over here plus the 4 customers that purchase water via bulk meter. The next slide talks about population and water demand projections. We use standard water supply planning methodologies, looked at the state data centers for population projections for New Britain, and surprisingly so, New Britain is projected to increase in population by 10% through the year 2040, as we can show down through here. The plan of conservation and development, which we use to look at commercial and industrial demands, projected very minor commercial or industrial growth. So we showed a very flat line for those components. What it resulted in is a total increase between the present and the year 2060 of about 14%. It's going from current of about 9.4 million gallons per day to a future of about 10.9 million gallons per day. And those numbers, if you look at other reports done by state agencies, the Central Connecticut WUC, their demand projections are higher than ours. So we think ours are actually on the conservative low side. Comparing this to the available supply that the city maintains, if you recall the little line diagram of the sources, the combined surface water and groundwater safe yield of the system is 13.2 million gallons per day. And we didn't include Patton Brook, and we'll talk about that later, in that number. Currently, as Ray mentioned, his first day is on the job here, his new position. He exercised the MDC emergency interconnection. We needed that to fill our reservoirs and let the other reservoirs refill. And that's 5 million gallons per day over a calendar year guaranteed. So the total system safe yield is 18.2 million gallons per day. It's higher than in previous plans because we found a way to get more water out of the existing system. Now we're talking about some things that could potentially reduce the amount of water that New Britain has available for its customers. One law that's on the books, the DEEP minimum stream flow regulations, require all dam owners to comply with this in the Connecticut River Basin by the year 2027. And we estimate this reduction will be in the range of 2 million gallons per day. So the baseline number as of 2027 will drop from 18.2 to about 16.2 million gallons per day. As part of our report, When I first started water supply engineering back in the 80s, it was pretty simple. You do a safe yield analysis, you look at demands, and you run some numbers. Presently now, things have come up such as climate change. All the state documents that are coming out says you need to consider the impact of climate change on your system. Also, they recommend other factors we'll see later, such as emerging regulations, large users, et cetera, which potentially could reduce the amount of water that you would have in the future when you need it the most. One item that was discussed in all the state plans, including the recently adopted state water plan, is climate change. And it's pretty important, as Ray mentioned. It suggests that increased temperatures coupled with increased precipitation will correspond to higher intensity storms and longer dry periods in the summer months, more frequent and intense droughts. It came directly from the state water plan. Connecticut's small reservoir systems could be very sensitive to these changes. And by small water systems, Ray has some large reservoirs. He also has some very small water reservoirs. And then, equally important, the distribution of rainfall may change significantly. More rain in the winter, less in the summer, causing more frequent dry periods during the warm months, where the impacts of drought can be exacerbated. So my comment to that is having available storage offline, available to collect this additional water during the winter and spring that's being predicted, will allow the city to store water to use during future drought periods. So it dovetails nicely with the climate change theory. Another factor that we brought up in our report is potential DEEP water diversion regulation changes. And I wouldn't think I would say this, but for once I think I agree with the Connecticut Rivers Alliance and Margaret Miner and the fine folks that work there in that changes are coming to the water diversion regulations. Presently, most water suppliers have what's known as registered diversions. They were in place prior to 1982, and once they're registered, you can withdraw up to their maximum amount, regardless of stream flow or other ecological conditions. That's compared to diversions that came in after 1982, which are permitted diversions. Those diversions had to consider the impact of the environment on pumping. Very typically, a well can be drilled and perhaps pumped at 500 gallons a minute most of the year, but when a critical stream next to it hits a threshold, you turn the well off. That's very common across Connecticut. So that's the direction which these regulations will likely be heading, in my opinion. And we've seen some examples of this. The Fenton River at Yukon, where during a drought, they continued to pump, and about a mile of stream went dry. And recently, right here in neighboring Bristol, Coppermine Brook was midst of the worst drought in history in a long time, and the withdrawals from Bristol and New Britain potentially made it even drier. With this new storage reservoir in place, as we talked about before, it can continue pumping when these stream flows are low, when they drop below the minimum levels, enhance the flow and quality in Coppermine Brook. In addition, Bristol has wells or straws in the same aquifer as New Britain, and if they were to do the same thing and purchase the surface water versus groundwater, additional stream flow would be available in Coppermine Brook. So having this reservoir in place allows New Britain to turn off its wells, potentially Bristol to turn off its wells. It would be a win-win for the environment. Now to do a quick look of the summary of what we're looking at between demand and supply. As we talked about, this is very dry engineering, so I'll try to explain it very quickly. We're starting here about 9.39 million gallons a day today, and we project an increase to about 10.9 in 2060. The vertical lines on top are the available supply for the city of New Britain. As we mentioned, the current safe yield is 18.2, and after we applied DEP stream flow regulations, it should drop to about 16.2. The actual impact of climate change, regulatory changes, it's not known. The state encourages you to consider it in your document, but they don't tell you how to consider it. So we took an estimate of saying what would happen if the combined impact of these things were a 10% reduction to New Britain supply. And you can see it would go from 16.2 down to 14.4. Still adequate to meet the projected demand, but the margin of safety is shrinking. What happens if those combined reductions turn out to be 20%? 10 for climate change, 10 for regulatory. Now we drop down to 12.6, we get even closer to our projected demands. These are just estimates, placeholders for now, but there's some number between 0 and where they're at. We need to account for them. The state encourage us to account for them in our calculations, and this just shows you that water will be reduced to some degree in the future, and we need to estimate that. Very quickly, part of the state comments was to look at other options. Even though it wasn't part of the study requirements, we were able to do that in the 30 days that we got their comments. And they asked us to look at enhanced water conservation, the Lamson Corner Reservoir that Ray mentioned, reactivating the Patton Brook well, and perhaps using Crescent Lake or Plainville Reservoir, because it's there. Why not try that? With respect to enhanced conservation, we showed in here that New Britain, over the last 5 years, has averaged 19.5% unaccounted for water, and with a high of about 23.7 in 1 year, higher than the typical 15% at industry standard. New Britain is taking steps looking for lost water. They're currently soliciting proposals to do a comprehensive water audit to help them identify where this water is and help them lower it. It's part of being a good water manager. One thing the state water plan also says is passive water conservation, just by housing changing hands, being renovated, more water efficient fixtures coming in. You can just reduce it by having better fixtures. New Britain demand is already on the low end. It's around 52 gallons per person per day. The state water plan shows a number of between 50 and 60, 60 being normal with a target of 50. So there may be some savings in new fixtures, but maybe not a lot of savings. So if we do a good job, and I have no doubt New Britain will, to bring this number down to industry standards, we can save about 0.19 million gallons per day, which is water we don't have to develop from other sources. It's a nice amount, but it's nowhere near the amount we're going to get from a future reservoir. Lamson Corner, Ray talked about this before, and I'll quickly go through here. 1,000 acres of lands were purchased for this. It requires a pump station on Vernal Brook, a transmission main, dam construction, roadway relocation to make a 262-acre parcel, a reservoir rather. It would get 1 million gallons of storage, or sorry, 1 billion gallons of storage, with an increase of yield of about 2.6. The cost previously was estimated at 15 million. This seems very, very low. It's probably going to be a lot higher than that 15 million. Some slides on it. Lamson Corner Reservoir would be located 10 miles away from Shuttle Meadow. To the north, it would flow into Wiggville. It would share some of the same common pipelines the other sources do, so its use would be somewhat restricted by that. And in an emergency, it's a long way away to get water from here to here. This is a zoom in on the reservoir site. This blue line here is the outline of the reservoir as was proposed previously. 262 acres of forest would be removed to create the reservoir. A dam would be constructed down through here. And these purple, light purple and dark purple shades are actually wetland soils identified by the Connecticut DEP. So in creating the reservoir, we're actually inundating about 116 acres plus or minus of wetland soils, far greater than the proposed quarry reservoir. In addition, State Route 69 goes through the center as well as Scoville Road. They would have to be relocated at a cost. And last is the Natural Diversity Database, the rare endangered plants and animal species that the state has identified having potential being in the area. And you can see the circles that are all throughout the area. So we would have, a study would have to be done to see what actually is there and what impact this proposal would have on them. So In summary, the benefits, the city owns the land and can give them a large supply. Challenges, we're losing forest, we're losing wetlands, we're losing rare and endangered species. A very difficult permitting process, probably equal or greater than the process that we're looking here for this quarry reservoir. High construction cost, and its location is not ideal. So we believe Lamson Corner is not really achievable in today's regulatory arena. Patton Brook well, this is a well that up till 2014 was leased to the Southington Water Department. It was recently reconnected to New Britain and pumped at 1 million gallons a day. It has hydraulic issues because it shares a pipeline with Walcott Reservoir. So when Walcott Reservoir has water or it's flowing, it reduces the amount we can use from the Patton Brook well. The well is relatively shallow, 32 foot deep, and its safe yield during drought conditions would have to be reestablished to see, is it viable? So even though we can pump it at 1 million, for now we're saying approximately 500,000 gallons a day would be a good estimate to use in planning. And to upgrade the cost for this to use it on a regular basis is estimated at $1 million, slightly more. Last option they asked, that the council asked us to look for is Crescent Lake, Plainville Reservoir. Nicely, DEP has a map of that on the website. 50-acre parcel, 15 foot deep, holds about 162 million gallons of water. It sounds like a lot, but if you look at, based on our typical demand, 16 days of storage versus 230 with the proposal. So essentially the reservoir appears to be too small to be used as a water storage reservoir as part of the project. And that just is sort of a summary of all the cost in there, and I don't want to rehash it. I want to give you guys a chance to talk. I don't want to rehash the slide, but summarizes the pros and cons of each option. I'd like to finish with Water Planning Council. They submitted their comments to the City of New Britain and had some conclusions, some of which we agree with, some of which we don't agree with. The first conclusion was the city did not substantiate the need for the reservoir. I think that's an opinion. I think if you look at the top line in our supply versus demand, if everything stays the same, there's no climate change, no reduction, New Britain may have enough water for the future. It may not. If you reduce that due to climate change or other factors, your margin of safety shrinks. And just to comment on the drought we had recently, we had 1 year of very, very low rainfall, followed by 2 years of decent rainfall. The 1960s drought had 4 years in a row, back to back to back to back of substandard rainfall. So essentially, that drought would, this New Britain, as well as other cities and towns, would have difficulty maintaining their supply. Second option, our comment that Water Planning mentioned is the water quality issue at Shuttle Meadow. They claim that by doing the reservoir, you're going to contaminate the reservoir with runoff and stumps and other things during construction. As shown by the process, everything will be in a self-contained excavation. Trees will be removed on a gradual basis so that all the water falling on the project will be contained and pumped away there. So there'll be no contamination of Shuttle Meadow during that process. Options to the project, we just talked about them and their impact. A lot of people looked at Lamson Corner as probably the savior. After looking at it, it has a lot of difficulty, a lot more difficulty in our opinion than the proposed project. Additional mitigation measures need to be discussed. As you can see, by moving the quarry line by 6 acres, we help improve the situation greatly. And mitigation measures would be proposed as part of the permit process and as required by the Corps of Engineers in town of Plainville to help minimize it. We will never, if this project goes forward, we're not going to eliminate the impacts there, but we can do our best to minimize it. The need to consider regional water supplies and demands, that was done as part of the analysis. Looking at all the 4 systems that use water here, we looked at their demands in the future as well as New Britain's. So we came up with a demand served by New Britain. And the last comment is we should be consistent with other documents, and I have a slide that follows that discusses this. couple things that did not show up significantly in their comments, but should be known to the citizens of New Britain, are the benefits to the environment of the 291 acres. Right now, the project consists of 72 acres, which would be, of forest will be removed. If it doesn't happen, and Tilcon does what it needs to do, there's 291 acres of land that can be developed based on what the zoning allows. So you could potentially have a larger loss of forest, a larger impact to the land than the 72 acres that are proposed in permitted care. In addition, we talked about Coppermine Brook. A lot of people were saying we need to do something for Coppermine Brook. This proposal does that. It's a large step in helping ensure the health of Coppermine Brook, but the state agencies are relatively quiet about those benefits. My last slide, before I turn it back to Ray, just sort of talks about what other planning studies do, and are we doing the same thing that they're doing? The Central Connecticut Water Utility Council just published a report in 2018. They talked about things of concern to them, what should be considered as part of the project. And this is directly from their report. Any future source, project should look at future water supply sources, the impact of climate change, stream flow regulations, impact of anticipated regulations, source water protection, and environmental concerns. All these things were examined in detail in our proposal. So if the state says we didn't follow standard procedure, I strongly disagree. We follow the procedures that were in the documents and assign numbers to them to estimate what their impact is. And last, the word resiliency has been relatively new to the water industry. And they define it as the ability of a system, population, or community to prepare for, withstand, recover from, and adapt to stresses. For example, natural disasters and climate change. And they say the following questions should be applied to each potential regional project to see if it's viable. Does the regional project build resiliency? Yes, it allows Ray and the city of New Britain to use different sources at different times to provide continuous service. Is it prudent to use in light of climate change? By having the water to store during times of plenty, we cannot withdraw from other sources during times of drought. Will it be, if it's a new source, will the source be resilient? Absolutely. It'll allow great flexibility to provide water to the citizens of New Britain. And is it prudent in the light of climate change? Absolutely yes. So thank you very much for sitting through. I know it's a lot of dry figures. I appreciate your time and focus. I'll turn it back to Ray to conclude, and thank you very much.
What about the water aquifers? You have not addressed the underground water aquifers, self-replenishing ones that you have all in this.
Excuse me, ma'am. My name's Joe Skelly. I'm a lawyer for the city representing the water board. This was a presentation. My name's Joe Skelly. I'm an attorney for the city representing the council and the Board of Water Commissioners here. What was on the agenda was a presentation by Leonard Engineering, which you just heard. There's not going to be any question and answer period. The next phase is going to be a public hearing of the council and the Board of Water Commissioners, and you folks can make whatever comments you want during that part of it. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Bill. I just want to conclude by saying, look, this is.
Excuse me, but
my name is Paul DeGorski, and I'm against this as much as anybody else. However, this is a public forum. They have the right to speak, even though a lot of what they say I disagree with 100% or 1,000%. People are going to speak. We have the opportunity to speak. When I speak, when anybody else speaks, I ask everybody here to give everybody the exact same courtesy as I expect the city and Leonard and the city attorneys to give everybody else. So I know we disagree with this. I know it's a very emotional issue. I know a lot of people are very outraged. However, if somebody has the podium, please give them the courteousness to sit and listen without comment, and then when you have your opportunity at the podium, I would ask everybody else to give you that same opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. In conclusion, this is a tough decision. We have a lot of things to think about. I am a water supply engineer. By the way, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Ramon Jose de la Cruz Esponda. I have been working for the city for 17 years as a superintendent of water quality. I have just been promoted to the deputy director of public works in charge of utilities. When I look at these issues, I think about the future needs of the people of New Britain. I look about water. I remember that first day that I was put in charge of this and I had to do something that hadn't been done in 60 years. Our drought was bad 4 years ago, but as Jim Erickson pointed out, the one that occurred in the 1960s was a lot worse. That was the reason the Wassail Reservoir was built. Okay, we have to make plans now. We know that the climate is changing. This is a duty that I feel that I have to the people of New Britain, to make the best plans that I can to keep them in water. There is a lot of things that are good about this plan. There are some bad things, but overall, I think there's a major benefit to all of us. I think that we can help the environment. I think we will protect the future of New Britain. I think we can become the basis of a regional water supply for not just New Britain, but for all the important towns around us. We can do so much with this. And again, there are some negative impacts. There is some loss of environmental sensitive land. But again, there is also environmental benefits. We won't have to take water and dry up the copper mine if I have a reservoir that I can leave alone when the water levels are low. Can we survive without this? Maybe. Do we really want to run that risk? We know that the scientists, the State Water Planning Council, the State Water Plan are telling us to create plans now, to be resilient, to have the ability to make changes now so we can have water in the future for our residents. We need to think about this long and hard. Remember, the New Britain Water Department was founded in 1853. And it is still serving us. Decisions were made then that impact us now. The decisions we make today will impact future generations. So we have to think about this very carefully, and we need to make the best decisions that we can. I want to thank you all for coming. I really appreciate all that you have to all say. I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate you giving us the respect to give this presentation. This is, again, an emotional topic, but we all have the best intent for the citizens of New Britain. So in that, I would like to conclude, and I would like to call the ballot back up and adjourn the board meeting. Thank you. We're just going to adjourn the public, the board meeting, and then we're going to start the public hearing. Okay.
35, and I'd like to call to order this special meeting of the Common Council, public hearing. Today is June the 26th. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Good evening. Alderman Keith Albert. Here. Alderman Ayalon. Alderwoman Breslin. Here. Alderman Carlozzi.
Here.
Alderman Giantonio. Present. Alderwoman Magnazuski. Here. Alderman Naples. Here. Alderman Pabon. Here. Alderman Reyes. Here. Alderman Rosado. Here. Alderman Salerno. Here. Alderman Sanchez. Here. Alderwoman Sanchez. Here. Alderman Santiago. Present. Alderman Smedley.
Excuse, out of state.
Commissioner Rosado.
Here.
Commissioner Rashad. Here. Commissioner Marzine. Commissioner Rakowski. Commissioner Zanobi. You have a quorum.
Do you have a notice to read?
Yes. Legal notice for the City of New Britain. The Common Council of the City of New Britain will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, June 26, 2018, at 7 p.m. at the Gaffney Elementary School Auditorium, 322 Slater Road, New Britain, Connecticut, for the following. Pursuant to Section 1D of Connecticut Public Act Number 16-61, the public hearing is to address the State of Connecticut's Council on Environmental Quality's report dated May 25, 2018, from Susan D. Merrill, Chair, to Mayor Aaron E. Stewart, the State of Connecticut's Water Planning Council's letter dated May 29, 2018, from John W. Bukowski III, Chair, to Mayor Aaron E. Stewart, and review/executive summary dated May 29, 2018, by the State of Connecticut's Water Planning Council. The State of Connecticut's Council on Environmental Quality report dated May 25, 2018, the Connecticut Water Planning Council's letter dated May 29, 2018, the Connecticut Water Planning Council's report dated May 29, 2018, and Letter Engineering Incorporated's report dated February 20, 2018, entitled Proposed Quarry Expansion and Future Water Storage Reservoir, are available for inspection on the City of New Britain's internet website, newbritain.gov/document/water/info.htm. Members of the public have the opportunity to submit comments addressed to the Council on Environmental Quality and/or Water Planning Council within 30 days of June 15, 2018 at www.ct.gov/ceq and/or www.ct.gov/water. At this public hearing, interested persons may be heard and written communications may be received. Copies of the council's reports are also available for public inspection during normal business hours in the office of the town and city clerk, City Hall, 27 West Main Street, New Britain, respectfully submitted.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, so just to go over the ground rules again, tonight is a public hearing. You all will have an opportunity to speak for 3 minutes and 3 minutes only. Please do not go over 3 minutes. You will be called out. I will call an individual and then I'll call 2 other people so that you can come to the front. So we will always have 2 other people ready to go after the one speaker has spoken. In addition, as I mentioned earlier, I will only tolerate respect for one another when someone's speaking. If you decide that you want to speak over someone else who's at the podium, you will not be asked to leave. You will be leaving. Okay? I will not have that at a public hearing. This is an opportunity for people to come and speak. We are representatives, whether you're from New Britain, Plainville, Southington, West Hartford, Brantford, wherever you're from, you will have an opportunity to speak tonight. There are quite a few people that are listed to speak. If you decide when it's your turn to speak that everything that you want to say has already been said, then you can just come up and say, I agree, I agree, I agree, and you can, unless you want to, again, you will have your 3 minutes. But if you decide that you don't want to at that point, you can just do that. You will be asked for your name, your address, and you'll be given 3 minutes. If you do not give your name and address, I will stop you. Okay, I don't think we should have any questions. Anything that I missed? All right, having said that, the first person to speak will be Suzanne Vilensky, followed by Liz Aronson and Dr. Dinsey? I'm sorry, I can't read the last name. But you're the 3rd person on the list.
Danette.
Yes. Hold on, 1 second. Yeah. Thank you. All right. I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said. Just ask your, okay. So Liz Aronson, is she in the room? Okay, great. So you're all set. Doctor, if you're 3rd, you can just have a seat. There's 2 more chairs in the front.
Well, do you mind if I stand?
You can stand, sir. Suzanne Vilensky, name, address, in 3 minutes, please.
Greetings, council members and commission members. My name is Suzanne Vilensky. I live at 544 Corbin Avenue in New Britain, born and raised. I am here to speak on the proposal in front of us tonight, and I'm not going to speak a lot because there's only 3 minutes, and I'm going to try and stay within my time frame. Not going to speak a lot about the environmental impact, as I believe that it to be severe and irreversible impact to that area, but my focus is really going to be on the water and the water quality. As I said, I'm here to speak on the proposal of New Britain to lease approximately 74 acres of currently protected watershed land to Tilcon so they can dig a crater and eventually, after 40 years, fill the crater full of water that hopefully the city will or will not be able to use for drinking water, potentially. As you might figure it out, I'm opposed to this option. And those of you who know me from my prior voting record on the council, you know that I'm not opposed to business engagements where the city can gain revenue. I supported several of them throughout the years. I supported Target, Costco, which was a big deal. But this is different from those. This has the potential to disturb or destroy both a currently available and valuable city asset, which is why I'm definitely against this. The State Water Council and the State Council on Environmental Quality reviewed the study and concluded that it could put New Britain's drinking water supply at risk for decades as the mining takes place. Are we really willing to risk that possibility? Someone had commented earlier that the water's been here for years and we've used it for years. That's because it's been undisturbed and we've been really good in taking care of it. And I believe that putting this in place is jeopardizing that. The entities behind this proposal are putting the prospect of money ahead of and against the overall prosperity, health, and welfare of the city of New Britain and its residents they are supposed to represent. Not only that, but this sets a dangerous precedent which has the potential to open up options to develop previously protected land in other communities of the state. It's bad enough that previously protected federal land is now being opened up to private entities for mining and for monetary gain. Do we really want to be the city that opens up the floodgates for this to happen in Connecticut? I do not think we do. And I will say that in 2014, I'm sure the state body implementing the switchover in the water supply for Flint, Michigan, from Lake Huron to Detroit River, because it was cheaper, thought that was a great thing when the initiative got passed. That too, again, was proposed for financial reasons and savings. They didn't count on the long-term health outcomes and unanticipated cost of reparations and providing bottled water to the city residents for over a year. Let us learn from their cautionary tale and not follow it. I urge those who have any influence in the city to vote against this, to not sign any contracts with regards to it, and I know the legislature is here, and I would appreciate them not forwarding this as well.
Thank you, Ms. Vilensky.
Thank you.
Ms. Aronson, the doctor, and John Sokolowski. And folks, our clerk has a time thing for 30 seconds. Please pay attention to that.
My name is Liz Aronson. I live at 424 Commonwealth Avenue in New Britain. And I listened very carefully to what the people said throughout the hour and a half that they were on. I read the Council on Environmental Quality report and the Water Planning Council's report very carefully. I am not a scientist myself, but as you may tell from my shirt, I do believe that water is sacred and water is life. And as with the Standing Rock situation, when pipelines were promised, this is going to be great, it'll go through, it won't mess up your water supply. There have already been leaks in that pipeline that went through the Native American lands. So promises are promises. I guess as I listened to the people speaking, what I thought was that the focus seemed to be on how beneficial the proposed reservoir will be to the city of New Britain. But I heard nothing about the benefits to Tilcon. So I have a bunch of questions, and I won't ask them all. That is the first one, but there are plenty of people speaking behind me who I am sure will ask some of those questions. But I wanted to know how much of our water will they use every day? And what will that do to the watershed and to the underground water? And how, somebody said the reservoir will increase the water supply. I was waiting for him to explain what that meant, but it just went by. So how does having a reservoir increase the water supply? The whole question about filling up that reservoir with runoff, we already know from living on streets in New Britain that runoff is polluted. So how is that going to be safe to drink? The other question is, how soon will that reservoir be available? If it's going to be because they dig, well, it's going to take that 35 or 40 years, and that's where the whole question of climate change, which I'm very glad that Ramon talked about climate change and the others talked about climate change, but who knows whether there will be in such severe droughts between now and then that there won't be any water to fill that beautiful reservoir 35 to 40 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. I have the doctor, John Sokolowski, and Linda Pagani. If you would also line up, that'd be great. Doctor, you have your name and address in 3 minutes, sir.
I'm Martin Dennett, 133 Westwood Drive, New Britain. I agree with so much that's been said and more that's going to be said, but I have just one little point or two that, because of that I will supply tonight. One is I've been watching the West Canal for over 50 years. So I know the area, I know the ponds, I know what's happened because of Tilcon's expansion over the recent years, how that's almost dried up. That pond is definitely going to disappear. There's been a change in our environment. We used to have wild strawberries and skunk cabbage and other things that grew in the wet. We no longer have that. My trees are changing. But that's not really what I came to talk about tonight. What I did want to mention that, having been here for a while, is that in 2006 in a tour of quarry, our guide told us that they were going to run out of rock in 10 years and we're going to have to move north across the highway. That this was going to be considerable expense and bad for the profit line, but that's the way things were. Apparently, between that time and 2 years later, somebody looked at the map and said, well, there are 130 acres of watershed property for Shuttle Meadow that we could use. It's adjacent to our current, and we're working our way to it and probably have reached that line by now. The problem being, of course, not that the city was opposed to leasing or selling or renting that land, but that state law prohibited them from doing that. So what can we do? Well, we have to have a water purpose. Well, why don't we fill the hole and make a reservoir? That was a brilliant idea, and that's what we've seen being expressed tonight. This was supposed to be an environmental study. They spent about 5 minutes on the environment, and everything else was on the engineering, which the city paid for Tilcon. I don't want to go into the further details about our relationship to the mayor then and the mayor now, but let us say that it was hard fought. The mayor said that he wouldn't do it if we didn't want it, but he never acted on that promise, and hopefully our current mayor, this is an issue which was a great plan for the 19th century, but this is 2018, and for this century we have to look ahead to a different situation. We have to save our environment. The Meadow Ridge, which is one of the two major geologic features in central Connecticut, which is a force to preserve, deserves our protection, and realistically, the day will come when we will stop all mining in the Meadow Ridge because it is too important to our environment and the quality of life in central Connecticut.
Thank you, Doctor. John Sokolowski, followed by Linda Pagani and Alex Rodriguez.
I am John Sokolowski. I live at 116 Bellevue Avenue, Southington. This proposal has never been about water. It's about Tilcon quarrying for another 50 years. All I ask is the council preserves our watershed protection laws and prevents Tilcon from profiting at the expense of everyone else. Initially, the Leonard report was not the environmental study that Public Act 16-61 demanded. It had to be forcibly altered. And in the end, it took 467 pages and over 350,000 taxpayer dollars to find out that blowing up a mountain is bad for the environment. The repeated claim that we've heard tonight, again and again by Mr. Respondent, is we're getting water. No, we're getting a cup. There's a big difference. The abysmal environmental impacts are too numerous for sufficient comment. Otherwise, the supposed independent third-party study is written as a persuasive piece, evidenced early in Chapter 2 Executive Summary. I bet this is the most read part of the report, seeing as how Moby Dick is also about 500 pages dry. Most of us just read the summary. Throughout the Executive Summary, several figures appear in bold print, including acres of land preserved and donated. Any information detrimental to quarry expansion is in regular font or worse, not mentioned whatsoever. Missing from Chapter 2 entirely are Class 1 and 2 watershed destroyed, vernal pools destroyed, expected extirpation of state-listed species of concern. Leonard apparently considered these figures were secondary information. I praise the Water Planning Council for reading this report from cover to cover and noting Leonard's finding of trichloroethylene in a water sample. Trichloroethylene is used as a metal degreaser. It's a drinking water contaminant and a human carcinogen. It was found at a level exceeding the proposed maximum contaminant level. Leonard's conclusion: this compound is not anticipated to be an issue. I wish I could expand on this, but the report is a nightmare to navigate. Page numbers are restarted every chapter and non-existent altogether. The document is uploaded in a way that term searches, or the Control-F feature, is impossible. It's no surprise that there was never any peer review of Leonard's report, and citing the failures of this report are going to take all night. It's insufficient. The transparency Gary Wall promised, CEO of Tilcon, in his 2016 proposal is a lie, as cloudy and dirty as the water basin once found in his pit. That water, by the way, was drained and the basin was covered up before members of the public and government were granted our site visit. That's painfully ironic. If this goes forward, I will be 77 when work on the reservoir begins. I expect Mr. Wall won't be around to fulfill his word. Tilcon will again be running out of land to quarry, but if they won in 2018 and had laws changed in their favor, why not propose another 50-year expansion? They'll be quarrying well into the 2100s. This proposal will benefit Tilcon at the detriment of our drinking water, the natural environment, and anyone who uses the two. There's a reason this is happening in New Britain and not in Greenwich or Canaan, nor is this happening in any of the towns north of us in the same geological formation with the same coveted trap rock basalt. New Britain needs the money, and Tilcon figures it can pay the city to forget about legal standards. It's private profit at the expense of the public. The public has been saying no since 2007. We do not want to drink out of an industrial puddle. We want clean water. All I'm saying is we defend the public health and maintain our water protection laws.
Thank you, Mr. Sokolowski. Linda Pagani, followed by Alex Rodriguez and Kate Fieldler. Sorry, thank you.
Linda Pagani, 4 Guernsey Road, Bloomfield. I oppose the change in use the City of New Britain is seeking for its water company land. I also want to associate myself with the comments made in the CEQ and WPC reports delivered to you in May. Land use changes like this can't be made in environmental isolation. As a Connecticut resident living in Bloomfield, I benefit from the ecosystem under discussion. So when New Britain seeks a legislative exemption from laws protecting watershed lands, which would weaken Connecticut's strong water protection laws, that affects me and my family. It affects everyone in our state. One thing that struck me as a glaring omission from the city's report was an analysis of the full environmental impact from the destruction of 72 acres of core forest. Not a word was written about the role trees play in keeping our air clean modifying air temperature, and helping to increase precipitation. In short, playing a critical role to help maintain a livable climate in our state. Fortunately, the Water Planning Council's report goes into great detail on this point. In citing the state's green plan, the Water Planning Council notes that forests add immensely to the quality of life for the state's residents, my family and yours. The benefits to the ecosystem are seemingly endless. Forests absorb rainwater and slow runoff, reduce flooding, filter pollutants from the air, water, and soil, regulate air temperature, supply outdoor recreation opportunities, and more. This is only one example of why Connecticut has nothing to gain when we allow the destruction of watershed lands. No amount of money, nor an unsecured promise of a storage reservoir 40 years from now can justify this environmental tragedy. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Alex Rodriguez, then Kate Fiedler, and John Kristopic.
Good evening,
Anderson, 3 minutes.
Good evening, council members. I'm Alex Rodriguez, and I'm a community organizer of the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters CHISPA program. And I'm here in opposition.
Your address, please, sir.
195 Abbotsford Ave. My apologies. I'm here in opposition to the Stewart administration's proposal to allow Tilcon Mining Company the ability to mine and quarry on protected watershed land, as it would endanger not only the people of New Britain, but our cherished wildlife as well. Such a proposal should not be taken lightly, as quarrying is the most intrusive and permanent landscape change possible. If Tilcon is allowed this 40-year operation on cherished land, much of the eastern portion of Bradley Mountain will be decimated. Let me say that again, decimated. Bradley Mountain's wildlife, soil, and forests are vital to the watersheds in filtering rainwater and snowmelt that replenish the reservoir and underground aquifers. The forest provides a valuable habitat for local species as well as carbon reduction. Deliberations with Tilcon must be ended immediately. There are existing laws in place, already put in place, meant to protect all of Connecticut's watersheds. An exemption to this law will threaten public health, the safety and welfare of New Britain residents, and their right to clean drinking water. Did I mention that Governor Malloy recently signed an executive order implementing a state water plan and recognizing water as a public trust? Governor Malloy stated that we should all be able to agree that water is a precious resource that should be protected for the public's interest and safeguarded for future generations in the event of emergencies. And this proposal by Tilcon does not benefit the future at all. The consideration of this harmful proposal is an environmental justice issue. An estimated 23% of New Britain's residents live below the poverty line. Environmental justice involves the fair and meaningful treatment of all people, regardless of color, gender, sexual orientation, and this proposal threatens people of color and low-income individuals in particular and must be rejected. Water is life, and the community's accessibility to our public trust should take precedence over any deal. People come first. Industry comes last.
Kate Fiedler, followed by John Kristopic, followed by Susan Grundy. Name, address, and 3 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comment. My name is Kat Fiedler, and I'm the legal fellow for the Connecticut Fund for the Environment. I'm here to represent our members. Our organization is based at 900 Chapel Street in New Haven. Connecticut Fund for the Environment strongly opposes this illogical proposal to destroy watershed lands.
Sorry, one moment. 900 Chapel Street, New Haven. Thank you. Please continue.
This project could not be justified by the creation of an unnecessary reservoir, all for the thinly veiled purpose of profiting off of a destructive mining lease. The lands subject to this proposal include 13.63 acres of Class 1 and 111.88 acres of Class 2 land. In other words, 95.6% of the project area is invaluable watershed land. Connecticut boasts some of the highest quality drinking water sources in the country, but this state did not achieve this by leasing its watershed lands for mining operations. Earlier, the question was asked why we need to plan for the future. Well, the state did plan for the future in protecting watershed lands. Let me tell you how. Watershed lands are critical for protecting the quality of drinking water, and it is the policy and practice of the state to provide these lands with the highest protections. The state water plan lists the protection of watershed lands as one of its top priorities. It is also the law. State statutes set forth restrictions on changing the use and leasing of watershed lands, and this state Supreme Court has held that these protections should be construed literally in order to support the legislature's goal of providing maximum protections for Connecticut's drinking water supply. Even so, it still appears that we risk taking our drinking water for granted. This project flies in the face of long-standing priorities and practices and is bound to set a precedent for other watershed lands in the state. The destruction of these lands will reduce the safe yield of drinking water during the 40-year project and destroy natural filtration, ecosystem services, and other ecological values that watershed lands provide. The proposal attempts to justify the destruction of Class 1 and Class 2 watershed lands through the development of an unnecessary and potentially infeasible reservoir. The need for this reservoir is unproven. The Water Planning Council wrote that the study relies upon the confluence of a series of speculative and undocumented contingencies relative to both water demand and supply occurring in unison in order to justify the need for a new reservoir. The Council on Environmental Quality also noted that the study lists a host of conjectural what-ifs as reasons the project would be beneficial. How far are we willing to stretch our logic and our imaginations to defend the destruction of watershed lands? Finally, it cannot be ignored that Leonard Engineering has a vested interest in the proposal moving forward, and bias against environmental groups here today, as stated by the representative in his presentation earlier, lending further distrust to the already flawed and unconvincing environmental study. The creation of an unnecessary reservoir does not and cannot justify the loss of Class 1 and Class 2 watershed lands and the associated risk to the purity and adequacy of the current water supply. Connecticut Fund for the Environment and its members urge that this proposal be rejected and that Connecticut's longstanding practice of prioritizing the protection of watershed lands be upheld. Thank you.
Thank you very much. John Christophic, Susan Bundy, followed by Mike Jensen.
John Christophic, 292 Linwood Street. I'd like to thank the Common Council for this opportunity. And I must say, this lighting is very flattering to all those up here. So let's go to that old question. What came first, the chicken or the egg? Did the city go to Telcon and say, you know, we need a reservoir. Can you help us out? Let's talk about Telcon. Have you driven down Woodford Avenue, White Oak Avenue recently? You better roll up your windows. Is Telcon a good neighbor now? There was no mention of the blasting in the area. We've talked to many people who have had damage to their homes due to the blasting. And now, you're moving closer to residents on the New Britain side of the quarry. The Vernal Pools on the edge of the quarry, they talked about it. Well, guess what? You dig a hole, they're not going to be there anymore. And one other thing that wasn't mentioned, there's an aquifer in Berlin, Bicentennial Park. Seeing how the city of New Britain sells water to the Kensington Water District and the Berlin Water District, back off of the Chamberlain Highway, there's an aquifer that in 1976 was condemned and taken from our family and 3 of our neighbors because it's an aquifer. They wanted to protect the water underneath the land. And then they had the balls to call that Bicentennial Park. in the true spirit of America. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Susan Grundy, Mike Jensen, followed by Paul Zagorski. Name and address in 3 minutes, please, ma'am.
Hi, Susan Brody, 292 Linwood Street, New Britain. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and members of the council that are sincere about this. This is like kind of a no-brainer. I mean, and I can't believe we spent this much money on this study, and the taxpayers are paying for it, and our mayor's not even present. No surprise here. And now, and the study's not even adequate. You did not bring up the aquifers one single time, which is a crucial part of this whole rock system of what goes in, feeds our reservoir. The reservoir that we couldn't even fill now, and 2 years ago, in August of 2016, actually it started in May. It started a couple years before, but wasn't announced that we had droughts. Well, by May of 2016, Aaron Stewart never announced that we had a drought. She was forced by Governor Malloy to announce that drought with a big puss on her face, not the usual giggly smile she has while she's lying for her teeth. And then the wind blew over the camera while she was talking. Then she did not put any water restrictions into place. Consequently, many people of the city who just go back and forth from work and have kind of lost hope didn't even know this was going on. They continued to wash their cars, water their lawns, and just go on as life as usual. The people of us who became aware of it were restricting our water flow. That was very irresponsible of her to do. That should be like a statute that you are required to say that. So these vernal pools that my husband also brought up and were brought up in the meeting, but not very much in the report. Once they're gone, yes, they don't come back. Also, removing all those woods, like the other woman said earlier, yes, that mass forest attracts rain. When you cut down the forest, then you create a desert situation. So there's no way in hell that this is going to get us more water. We could have kept that reservoir up higher, which it was against her agenda. And it was like God's will that at that time that we had that going on. It was the crux of our fight. And we're like, look at the reservoir now, Aaron. And her response was, well, I can't make God make it rain. I mean, I know there's real deep thinking going on there. Yeah, no shit, you can't make God make it rain. You know? I mean, it's like, there is so much what is New Britain's motivation behind this? I still think there are some people that are financially benefiting. I am not going to say the names, but I've said it in the past. I'm not going to incriminate myself. There's certain people that are sitting here that are traitors to our town, okay? You are promised to protect you. There's no way you can justify tearing down all these acres and say that it's okay and that we're going to get more water. We're not going to be able to fill up the other basin. We can't even fill the reservoirs we have now.
Thank you. Mike Jensen, Paul Zagorski, and Dr. Bill Stopczyk.
Hi, I'm Mike Jensen, 25 Willis Street, New Britain. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm a lifelong resident, homeowner, taxpayer, but not a public speaker. But I do drink the water. I do hike on the lands that are proposed, that will be affected by this, some of the trails that will be moved. I strongly oppose this plan. 2 state commissions reported on this plan, offered an opinion on this plan. I certainly can't, and I don't think anyone sitting there or even back behind me can look at all the nuances and make the correct decision, but these 2 state agencies, the Water Planning Council and the Council on Environmental Quality, have the wherewithal to do that, and both weighed in against this. I think that should weigh heavily on the council's decision. The report that I saw, in my looking at the numbers, didn't really demonstrate a need for this additional capacity. It used some projections that offered opinions, and then the gentleman presenting the plan used the word opinion against the Water Planning Council, so that's their opinion. Well, that report is that study's opinion, that Leonard Engineering's opinion. I don't think this is good for the city of New Britain. I guess 10 years ago, we shot down a similar plan, and due to, people speaking up like this tonight, and I kind of wonder why we spent another $300,000 to commission a report. Did we think the public opinion would change? That seems like a waste of money. So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Yeah, folks, I don't know if we need to adjust the microphone, but it's hard, it's a little difficult for us to hear. Where's our tech people? Do we have any tech people here? Smedley's not here. Alderman Smedley's not here. Bring the mic up a little bit, please. Maybe some of our media technicians can help us? Thank you.
Hello. I'm sorry, I might be a little out of sequence because I have a little...
Well, you're not Paul Zagorski.
No, I'm David Bakey. I live at 54 Victoria Road.
Yeah, but sir, we're doing this in the list in which people have been called up.
I'm sorry, I thought I heard my name called. I have a hard time hearing over the clapping. Oh, I'll be brief.
Sir, no.
Okay.
You're out of turn, so I will call you.
All right.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so we have Paul Zagorski, followed by Dr. Stavchuk, and followed by Katerina Hutchinson.
Good evening, members of the council. Paul Zagorski, 125 10 Acre Road. I guess when I hear this, there's only one word that comes to my mind, that's arrogance. Specifically, they talk about that this is a need for water. Well, what they don't talk about, they did a study 10 years ago. They said we're going to lose 160,000 gallons a day by destroying the watershed. That's clean, fresh, naturally filtered water that we are going to lose. That comes out to 3 billion gallons of water that is irreplaceable and lost forever. 2, they talk about their supply numbers in which they have overestimated demand, they have underestimated supply. The Water Planning Council called those numbers, they said they are undocumented and they are speculative. I'll make it easier. Essentially, they're saying they're made up. As to the need that we have, the water supply we used to use, we peaked in 1970s. It was 12.3 million gallons a day. We're at 9.5 million gallons a day. We have reduced our consumption by 25 to 30% over the last 40 years. As to the drought, that was handled horribly by the city. Mr. Esponda was not the director at the time, so I'm not criticizing him for that. Gil Bly was. The mayor did nothing. That was an unannounced drought. It went on for 6 months. During the high consumption summer months, the mayor never said a word. Our neighbors in Southington had no problem adjusting to that. They didn't have to buy water. Our neighbors in Bristol had no problem adjusting to that. They did not have to buy water. That was solely through the negligence of our mayor and our elected officials who did nothing whatsoever to warn the residents that we need to conserve. As to the Lamson Corner where they talk about that reservoir could be developed, yes, it is. The State Health Department has said that is a high-quality water source production. This Tilcon Reservoir quarry pit is not defined as a high-quality water source for the state of Connecticut. And I think, this is not about water. Everybody knows it. It's about Tilcon, and Tilcon only. It's about them getting a quarry. The city, Tilcon, Leonard, they can spin this any way they want to do, but there's nothing they can do to change the true nature any more than, and this is a great quote from the Connecticut Supreme Court, any more than one can make a bull a cow, and this is bull. No ifs, ands, and nuts about this. The Water Planning Council made it abundantly clear to Leonard Engineering on multiple occasions that this is not a mining study, this is not a water supply study, it's an environmental study. We got 457 pages, 40 pages deal with the environment. Those impacts are totally minimized or ignored, and all it is about a Tilcon quarry feasibility study. In my opinion, it's a waste of money, and I want my $354,000 back. This is not an environmental issue. This is a human rights issue because taking water from people, water is a public trust resource, and I will paraphrase Dr. Martin Luther King, who said, a threat, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice anywhere. A threat to our water supply anywhere is a threat to our water supply everywhere. New Britain is not going to be a Flint, Michigan. No way, no how, never. Thank you very much.
Dr. Skopchak, Katerina Hutchinson, and Valerie Rosetti.
Bill Ostapchuk, 24 Forest Street, New Britain, Connecticut. Before us is a question of value, and it's a larger tapestry than just a quarry reservoir. Patton Brook well was sold during a drought. At a registered water diversion of 1.2 million, under lease to Southington, they pumped as much as 360 million gallons of water during the year, 355 million gallons during the year. The chronology is interesting. December 2015, the former head of the water department alerted the state we were pumping from our auxiliary sources from September 2015. January 2016, they indicated, watch your sources. We sold it as excess water in the summer. Leonard was asked to complete the safe yield form for the state in September. The sale was rescinded because of the worst drought in 30 years. My concern with this study is simple. The measurements of surface and groundwater at Shuttle Meadow watershed were taken during the worst drought in 30 years. The executive's summary states, watershed's hydrology is derived principally from direct precipitation and storm runoff with negligible to minor contributions by groundwater discharge. It's contradicted by Leonard's own findings. In 2007, it said mining the watershed would cost 200,000 gallons of water a day to Shuttle Meadow. In this study, it says 160,000 gallons of water a day. You mean that comes from rainstorms? Coppermine Brook. There's a serious concern about pollution from impervious surfaces, including garden chemicals, petroleum residue, E. coli. I refer you to an article in the Hartford Courant, June of 2016, where Trout Unlimited, the Farmington Watershed Association, and the Connecticut River Alliance are trying to clean up part of the Quabbot River. Coppermine Brook feeds that. The head of the Farmington River Water Association expressed the concerns about trash, E. coli, garden chemicals in that water. But go beyond that. The study also suggests that when our reservoirs are at 90% or more, we're going to pump from White Bridge Surface Supply Station, one of our largest reserves, simply for storage. There is no discussion about what happens to the watershed of Coppermine Brook. I would also, one clarification. The land for Lamson Corner was purchased at the beginning of the 20th century. The 1966 Water Department report suggested we build a recommended we build a reservoir there. Leonard in 2002 said we could do that, and we could draw about 7.2 million gallons from Vernal Burlington Brook. Presently, we're looking to sell 15 acres of that watershed.
Dr. Ostapchuk, thank you.
Yeah.
Katerina Rosetti and Rebecca Ahern.
Hi, my name is Katerina Hutchins. I live at 25 Oakland Avenue, New Britain. I have lived here all of my life. I'm here to represent who you're talking about, your future generations. That is me, that is my children, and I'm here today to tell you I oppose this. I hold a bachelor in biology specializing in ecology and in biodiversity. I have the privilege of working with the Department of Environmental Protection, taking part in the black bear and bobcat studies. By the way, you should have looked at that environmental study. There was no mention of mammals there. They talked about amphibians and reptiles. You think mammals don't live in the forest? Ask that question right there. Currently, I work for the Audubon, Connecticut, protecting our native piping plover, which is now considered federally and threatened, state threatened due to the overuse and exploitation of our shores. But that's another problem for another day. I'm here today to come and represent the nearly 600 animals and plants that are currently listed as endangered, threatened, and special concern in the state of Connecticut, and those who reside on the lands Tilcon plans to annihilate, including the ones who no longer have a voice, such as the once native wolves, the eastern mountain lion, who was officially declared extinct not that long ago, and the extinct passenger pigeon. They say those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it, and I'm here to give you a history lesson of Connecticut's destructive past. In the 1600s, prior to the settlers' arrival, Connecticut was approximately 96% forest. Within the first 200 years of our presence, we managed to whittle that down to roughly 20%. With these changes come repercussions, including the eradication and persecution of black bears, wolves, mountain lions, fisher, elk, beaver, and the passenger pigeon, to name a few. It wasn't until 1914 that beavers were reintroduced, 1984 when black bears made their way back, 1988 when we introduced fishers as well. I speak for the animals who have suffered in the past and continue to do so at the hands of politicians. You guys talk about Plainville and the 72 acres. We already have problems with black bears living at 84 Lumber Yard. When I worked for the Deep, we went out there to check out a mother and her cubs living right there on the lumber yard, going to Applebee's to find food for her young. And then you talk about removing 72 additional acres. Where are her children going to go? Where are her future generations going to go? Thank you.
Ms. Rosetti, Ms. Ahern, and Gary Garwisky, I hope.
Valerie Rosetti, 88 Kenmore Road, Bloomfield, Connecticut. I'm not a resident of New Britain, but our town suffered through a really disturbing incident in which water as a corporate asset took precedence over water as a public trust, when almost 2 million gallons a day was afforded to a California bottling company in perpetuity. And it's surprising tonight, it's kind of refreshing to hear water utility representatives talk about increasing stream flow and having extra water and protecting, New Britain in a drought, because for the last 3 legislative sessions it's been about nobody's going to tell water utilities where they can sell their water, and climate change says it's going to precipitate more in Connecticut, and we'll do everything possible not to allow diversion regulations to change. And in no way will we support the idea that water is a public trust. There's a rampant deregulatory atmosphere going on in the country right now. I would urge New Britain not to participate in that. The corporate interests of Tilcon or Niagara or California SJW Group do not take precedence over the environment and the future of our natural resources in Connecticut. And I would also, I just want to mention, if you read Connecticut General Statute 2532, and you read the strength of the language that's in there about protection of Class 1 and 2 watersheds, that is one of the top 10 consensus recommendations coming from the state water plan. It would be a tragic precedent to circumvent all the regulatory rules that are in process to apply for a permit to the Department of Public Health and DEEP, and instead go to the state legislature for an exemption because a corporate interest is heavily involved. I was here walking around in New Britain when Pattonbrook Well was up for sale, and then it seemed really odd that all of a sudden New Britain wasn't going to have enough water, and it's almost by, somewhat of the same magnitude of water that's going to be, the safe yield is going to be bumped up here. So once again, I hope you cannot let Connecticut go the way of the rest of the country and start trashing our very strong regulatory protections for our water. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hearn, Mr. Garwisky, and Jim Gosselin.
Good evening. Thank you for hosting this evening. My name is Rebecca Carabin Ahern. I'm one of the owners of Acme Monaco Corporation, 75 Winchell Road in New Britain. I'm also a Plainville resident on 50 View Street. So my home and my business both border Tilcon. as an employee, as a company owner of New Britain, we have about 200 employees. 200 employees that I'm responsible for them and their families, and I want to stay here in New Britain with our company. We've been here 71 years. And I understand what Tilcon's trying to do. They're a business, and they're trying to stay competitive, but at what cost? The cost of destroying valuable, lush watershed property and annihilating every living creature on this path, some of which are on Connecticut's list for extinction. They should give serious consideration to moving to the 200 acres that they hold permits on the other side of Plainville, where there's no businesses and there's no homes. As a neighbor to Tilcon over the recent years, our company has sustained serious damage. We have right now 110 documented cracks in our foundation. We cannot run sensitive equipment when they blast. It will not get out of calibration, and I'll have to fly in folks from Chicago and Cleveland, Ohio to recalibrate the equipment. The blast, the dust is so bad that we do have to change our HEPA filter 6 times more than normal. So in the winter season, when they're not blasting, we don't have to change them as frequently. When they start blasting, we have to continue that maintenance. Because we make a medical product, we're FDA registered, we have to keep everything so clean. On our end of Plainville where we live, we have well water. And when we try to get our well water tested and folks find out where we live, they won't test it. They say we border Tilcon and they won't test our water. So that's pretty serious. I thank you for listening. I urge you not to pursue this devastating destruction of our sacred environment. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Gorleski, Mr. Goslin, and Merrill Gay.
They couldn't hear you.
Mr. Gorleski, Mr. Goslin, and Merrill Gay.
May I approach the board?
Clerk.
Good evening. Well, Gary Gursky, 28 View Street, Plainville, Connecticut. The damage is done. And the letter reported states that the water rolls off into the quarry. As you'll see in these pictures that I've made for you to keep and look at, the pictures do not run off into the quarry. In fact, they run down our backyards, creating a 4-inch deep hole where we have to build bridges so we can get into the woods. So what's still along with that comes the standing water. This was after the rain the other day. Bugs, dirty surface water. So what's Tilcon's answer to this problem? Let's throw up a few walls where this was a hiking trail and a bicycle trail. It's now 4 feet deep. So they took quarry rock and built walls where the water runs off. So this contradicts the Leonard report saying that the water just goes off into the quarry. The damage is done. It pours out of our streets. It's pouring out of our street right now. So you got to just take a ride up View Street, take a little walk to see how negative and how false the report is. The second document I brought tonight for you folks is from the town fire marshal, Larry Sutherland in Plainville. Because if a blast blows a clock off your wall,
use your mic, please.
If a blast blows a clock off your wall, you can't call anybody in New Britain. So what you have here from Larry Sutherland in Plainville is 176 blasting complaints starting in 2004. So if you do the math, that's a blasting complaint a week to present. But some of the complaints are 10 in a day of a blast. It also states where Tilcon at one time had a cease and desist order until they checked the gas line that the 15 houses that border their property was cracked. So the damage is done. Keep these and think about it. Any further damage to that land it's already here. So you have to strongly oppose this law, this thing the mayor's trying to do. That's all I have to say. Let's move it along. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Gosselin, Mr. Gay, and Deb Tompkins.
Jim Goslin, 344 Worcester Street, New Britain. Bringing greetings from Richard Judd, 119 10 Acre Road, New Britain. A statement from him tonight, June 26th. To the members of the New Britain City Council, I have previously submitted to you, June 6, 2018, comments pertaining to the City of New Britain's proposal to lease 13.6 acres of Class 1 watershed land and 111.9 acres of Class 2 watershed land. Those statements, to which are added these brief additions, are submitted in accordance with the requirements of Public Act 16-61. The Council has an extraordinary opportunity to act in a responsible manner to protect the water resources and environment. Contrary to the overall lack of ingenuous responses offered by the New Britain Water Department and Leonard Engineering, enormous and irreplaceable damage will be done to the environment and to both fauna and flora. Water needs to be regarded as a public trust, a doctrine that recognizes the public right to many natural resources. That the City of New Britain would authorize a change in use of the watershed property to allow Tilcon Incorporated to strip mine is inconceivable. Do the appropriate and proper legal action and deny Tilcon the opportunity to lease the watershed property. Sincerely, Richard L. Judd. As a neighbor of Tilcon, I can't wait for that operation to cease. I suffer at 344 Worcester Street, the noise, the dust, the house vibrations, and some damage to the house.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Gay, Ms. Tompkins, and Debbie Fleischer, I believe.
Good evening. My name is Merrill Gay. I live at 214 Buell Street. Earlier this evening, we heard the words climate change more times than I could count. And while we ought to be concerned about climate change, I would argue that if we didn't have a quarrying operation right next to us, that digging a big hole and as a reservoir would probably not be the way we'd respond to a water shortage. We were looking at, if you listen carefully, 19 to 23% of our water is unaccounted for. Wouldn't it make much more sense to be looking at where are we losing water and look at instituting building codes and things that would encourage reduction of water usage, rain barrels for people who want to water gardens, all of those sorts of things, low flow showers, lower flow toilets, and conservation efforts where, you send everybody and all of the water customers a little blue tablet they can drop in their toilet to figure out whether it's leaking or not. Those are not sexy things. They're not things that involve Tilcon paying the city a lot of money. We should really understand what this is all about. This is about Tilcon and the $1 billion or so worth of rock under our watershed land. And some politicians in town thinking that this may be a cure for our budget woes, that we can get Tilcon to pay us some money for the mineral rights. We need to separate these two things. This is the future water needs of the city and this quarrying proposal. This isn't, the future reservoir is the fig leaf that we're hanging over a quarry to make it look pretty and try and push the idea of changing the water usage requirements. I urge you to reject this lease agreement, and New Britain should not set the precedent of opening up protected watershed land across the state to destructive quarrying operations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Day, Ms. Tompkins, Ms. W. Fleischer, and Ann Spire.
Deborah Tompkins, 21 McDonald Street, Plainville.
Microphone.
Thanks. Deborah Tompkins, 21 McDonald Street, Plainville. I am a former Inland Wetlands Commissioner, and as such, I oppose this expansion. It would be a decimation to the mountain that would kill protected flora, wildlife, and wetlands to create a crater to hold water that is pumped from a source that already exists. And just the thought of it is mind-boggling that anybody would think that that's okay to do that. So I beg you to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Fleischer, Ann Spire, Kenneth Spire.
Good evening, my name is Debbie Fleischer. I live at 69 West End Avenue, New Britain. I'm a lifelong resident. My house vibrates twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 20 of 11 and 10 of 11, every time Tilcon decides to blast. Called them up, asked them if they could use a touch less, more explosives. If they had a seismometer, no change. I have energy efficient windows, the gas in the windows, because of the blasting, my windows are now cloudy. There goes that investment. Tilcon, when they started, I've been born and raised here, they had enough trap rock in that mountain to blast for the next 100 years. That rock in the town of New Britain has been very good to them. They've employed families, probably most of which don't live in town. And they've done very well. New Britain, not so well. We get dust, we get pollution, we get houses vibrating, our taxes go up. I do have one question tonight. Is Tilcon here? Nope, I don't see him. If this was such a good benefit to these towns, where's Tilcon and why aren't they here to promote it? They're not here because they want a workaround so they can mine some more, destroy the land, eat up the watershed. Once you destroy a natural resource, you can't get it back, just like you can't get an extinct animal back. It's time for Tilcon to give back to the towns that have been so profitable, generous, and good to them. It's time for them to find another place to do their strip mining. If you go on Google Maps and you look at the hole in the ground that's there, it's devastating. It's awful. So if I have this story right, due to the Leonard study, they want to make sure no runoff goes into Shuttle Meadow Reservoir. It's going to go back into the cup, as someone so eloquently put it, to make sure it doesn't pollute the Shuttle Meadow Reservoir. They're then going to give us that cup back so we can have it. Does that make sense to anybody? Doesn't make any sense to me. The underlying reason I can't help but feel is based on corporate greed, profits, and New Britain looking for a quick fix to keep from raising our taxes. When what New Britain really needs to do is manage our money better, not look for the quick fix, because this change here ain't making it. It's not a good choice. It will damage us permanently. We cannot get this resource back. So who's it really going to benefit? Not New Britain in the long run. It's going to benefit Tilcon and Tilcon only. And when they're done with that, they're going to pack up and leave us with bigger holes in the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And Spire, Kenneth Spire, Bobby Bruno.
Ann Spire, 13 Audubon Street, New Britain. I'm here to oppose this proposal. Let me be very clear about this. I oppose it. I don't agree that we need this. We are told population increase. Accept The population of New Britain is going down. The population of Connecticut is going down. I don't see the population increase where we were told. When the former industrial fathers purchased a great deal of water for New Britain, it was because industry required huge amounts of water in those days. But we are no longer in the 19th century. We are no longer in the 20th century. Our manufacturing no longer requires that sort of watershed. I don't see the need to be established. Second of all, we're told tonight we need to be prepared. Yes, we need to be prepared. We need to be prepared by keeping our watershed protected. Class 1 watershed, Class 2 watershed are protectionist lands so that your waters will be clean. And we need to enforce those laws that were passed that enable us to protect our water laws, not by mining around the corner from a reservoir. Third point, we're told tonight that, yeah, there will be some environmental sacrifice that we will need to make up our minds how important this is to us. It is very important to us. Box turtles, salamanders, maybe they're small, they're in the lower end of the environmental chain, but every single piece of the environmental chain sustains the life of every other piece. And if we intervene in it, we are going to be sorry one day. We do not destroy the environment without paying a huge price, and that's the price we can't afford. 4, we keep hearing some comments about how they're going to fill this reservoir, and over the past year and a half, I've heard quite a number. It rains extra on the mountain, came out early on, and then somebody said, nah, that's not gonna work. And then they said, well, in high times of rain and flood, we'll do flood skimming waters. It can be pulled in and cleaned. If that's the water that comes off the streets, my friends, with Roundup in it and transmission fluid, etc., no thank you. Tonight we're told that we can pump water from another part of our watershed to put in this hole in the ground, and somehow that doesn't make a lot of sense to me either. So, moving on. My 5th comment. I really don't trust them to contain their contaminated water within their little cup. I also think that we're ignoring the fact that when they blast, a great deal of stuff will go up in the air, not very healthy stuff, and where will it land? Part of it will land right in the clean reservoir that we have now. Not a good idea. One more thing struck me as I was sitting here. Oh, I missed my 30 seconds.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Ms. Byer.
Tilcon sells the company. We're left with a hole in the ground 35 years out.
Thanks, Byer, Bobby Mary Ward, I'm sorry.
Good evening, I'm Ken Spire, live at 13 Audubon Street in Britain. There are many problems with this proposal, but because I only have 3 minutes, let me focus on the one that feels most important to me, and that is water quality. And there are 2 problems here with water quality. One is what will happen during the mining operation, and 2, what will happen at the end of the mining operation. Now, during the mining operation, we've been told by the engineering firm that Tilcon hired that the water will all be contained in this hole or cup, except that we just heard that it's presently not being contained in the hole or cup. It's flowing outward. Now, will they be able to do better in the future? Well, the 2 state agencies, the 2 expert agencies that looked at this, said no, they have not shown that they will be able to contain this in the future. So we're talking about contaminating our water supply with the products of strip mining and blasting. Now, at the end of the 40 years or so, when we get this hole in the ground, they're calling a reservoir. And they say this is going to provide us with additional water. Well, first of all, they're contradicting their own report. The report said that this would be skim water, flood water that would be contained. And that is the dirtiest form of water. I mean, short of sewage. It's the dirtiest form of water that anyone would even talk about using. And that's not what we want to do. We don't want to be in a position 40, 50 years from now where we have to decide between spending a huge sum of money for a processing plant to clean up the water, which undoubtedly will cost more 40 years from now than it would cost today, or putting up with the dirty water and becoming another Flint, Michigan. And now they're saying that the water is coming from existing sources. Well, they're not really clear as to what those existing sources are, but I know it's not even what their own report says. And two other things, if I've got a little bit of time left. One, just to amplify on what the previous speaker said. Tilcon is promising that at the end of the project, they will, restore this, establish the parameters of the hole, put back the trees and so forth, if they're still in business. But I would say to the council that if we're going to rely on such a promise, let's make sure that it is a guaranteed promise. Let's ask for escrows or bonding so that if Tilcon gets bought up by some multinational conglomerate, as it already has been, and decides to leave or just goes broke, the promises can actually be fulfilled. Okay, and one last very quick point. I would ask the council to look at the question, we're paying for this report, are we getting what we paid for? And if not, should we be paying the full price? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steiner. Mary Pelletier.
Good afternoon. My name is Harvey Bill. I live at 195 Hereford Road. And I'm here today, even though the fact, I just had brain surgery last week, and I'm supposed to be at home recovering. But there are some issues that are more important than even myself, and this is one of them. I'm really, really worried about the future of New Britain. And what you guys face and what our city faces right now, this is the most important issue that you guys are going to be facing all year long. And as the health and the well-being of the people of New Britain and of our environment and of all the animals that live here for many generations to come, for people who are here born and who have yet to be born. The reality is, this plan, it scares me. I mean, it's a really scary plan if you look at it. The fact that we're taking out so much of our forestry and we're literally putting, on the line our drinking water. We need water in order to live. We need water as a city in order to attract and continue to attract new businesses here, to grow the economy, to provide hope and opportunity for people. This is not just about the environment, and this is about the future. This is about us. And what I don't really understand is why are we even discussing selling off our public water assets and our resources in the environment to the highest bidder? We do not benefit in New Britain from this deal. The people do not benefit. The taxpayer does not benefit. So why are we doing this? Why are we even talking about this? 50, 100 years from now, what would your legacy be like? You have to ask yourselves, do you want your legacy to be one that you allowed a company to come in, strip mine our forest, turn what was once beautiful land into barren earth, scorched earth with no plants, no wildlife? I mean, even by Tilcon's mission, we may not even be able to use the water in 40 plus years. I mean, they can't even guarantee us that. Or do you want your legacy to be one where you fought for the people of New Britain, you protected the environment, you advocated for the rights of others, and you did the right thing? I hope to God that you guys all make the right decision. And that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Mary R., Mary Pelletier, and Peter Davis.
Mary Ridings Ward, 176 Marcia Drive, Bristol, Connecticut. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Burial for being here and speaking so eloquently on behalf of the future and future generations. Commissioners and councilors, I am the president of the Pequabic River Watershed Association. The Pequabic River Watershed Association educates and advocates on behalf of a healthy Pequabic River. The Pequabic River watershed is comprised of land in 6 towns: Harwinton, Plymouth, Burlington, Farmington, Bristol, and Plainville. We are neighbors of New Britain, and the New Britain Water Department owns land and water rights along the Pequabic River in Bristol and in the Pequabic River watershed. I am here before you today to oppose the quarry expansion proposed by the City of New Britain and comment on the environmental study. The State of Connecticut Water Planning Council reviewed the City of New Britain's report entitled Environmental Study, Change in Use of New Britain Water Company Land, Proposed Quarry Expansion and Future Water Storage Reservoir. The Water Planning Council found the City of New Britain's proposal to lease protected watershed property for the purpose of mining the mountaintop places a significant risk on New Britain's current drinking water supply. Additionally, the Council's review indicates there does not exist a need for a new reservoir to meet the demands of the New Britain Water Department's customers now or 40 years in the future. Therefore, one can only draw the conclusion that the significant risk to the quality and quantity of the current drinking water supply is not one worth taking. The Pequabic River Watershed Association is not only concerned as neighbor water stewards, but we also feel compelled to comment on the plant's proposal to fill a newly created reservoir with 2.3 billion gallons of water skimmed from property within the Pequabic River watershed. The proposed flood skimming operations would occur adjacent to the Coppermine Brook, a major tributary to the Pequabic River. The Coppermine Brook has already been under threat of drought due to diversions, which contributed to its going dry during the summer of 2016 at the confluence with the Pequabic River. The city's report also does not analyze or discuss the costs of pumping such a large volume of water from Coppermine Brook to the site to initially fill the reservoir or the future cost of pumping replacement water. The infrastructure and operational costs could be considerable. Additionally, the environmental review of infrastructure and pumping water from Bristol to New Britain is another hurdle for the project to overcome.
Thank you, ma'am. Mary Pelletier, Peter Davis, Nora Paso.
I'm Mary Pelletier. I'm a resident of 80 Elizabeth Street in Hartford, Connecticut, although I did actually live in Prentice Place on New Britain Road. I'm the founding director of Park Watershed, a 501c3 citizen stewardship watershed association for the Park River Regional Watershed, which includes parts of New Britain. And if parts of New Britain overlap into the watershed, then the whole municipality is included in our territory for the 501c3. So I'm here, there's so much to say, but you know, I realize that all of you as city council members are trying to resolve budget issues. And you know, as a resident of Hartford and also having watched the whole Niagara thing unfold, the issue of jobs and funding, you know, taxes is critical. But I'd just like to point out that what's happening in the western United States, where water scarcity is of critical significance already, where climate change is pressing upon those states with wildfires, with water shortages, etc., is that manufacturing is moving to increasing products that can deliver better water efficiency low-flow shower heads, low-flow toilets, low-flow faucets, all sorts of products that we know have been out there. They're increasingly getting better, right? And this whole world of, maybe we call it green manufacturing, is flourishing. Cities like Milwaukee are saying that they want to be the next industrial center for water efficiency. And that is all about protecting our natural resources, but actually creating greener businesses. And I think that's a really important point because Tilcon is clearly not a good neighbor to your citizens. You're hearing it, and they are not going to be accountable. They're not accountable now. They're not going to be accountable in 40 years, no matter what lawyers write up. They can sell the company, they can move the company. You can't even get their business records because they're a foreign company, right? So that's just important. And of course, last but not least, those future generations of New Britain and of Connecticut, we need the great laws of Connecticut. People are going to move back to Connecticut because we have had laws that have protected our natural resources. People in LA, I've heard people say they don't even drink, they don't even brush their teeth with the water in LA because there's so much arsenic and contaminants in it. People are eventually going to move back to this area because you've protected those resources. And I hope you build the industries and the economy that protects that. And that means getting rid of Tilcon.
Thank you, Ms. Pelletier. Peter Davis, Nora Pasco. I have a last name of Beep, H-E-A-P, I believe.
Hello, Peter Davis, 36 Hickory Hill Road. Appreciate the board members' time. Very important for you guys to represent the residents in New Britain. I'm coming to speak about the residents in the direct path of Tilcon. I listened to an hour and a half of engineers that are paid, I think, to prove that this can happen and could be viable for the town. I heard more about saving toads and peat moss, and I think about 8 seconds to say we're going to get within 1,000 feet of neighborhoods. So I would certainly like to hear a lot more about how they're going to guarantee not impacting residents. I've heard from the other business owners close by how they're impacted, and I would think that's just coming our way as well. So I would like to encourage you to hear more on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Nora Pasco, I have a last name of Heap, and then Maggie Green.
Hi, my name is Nora Pasco. I live at 104 Harrison Street. I'm here for the future as well, for myself, my generation, my son's generation. We do not want this Tilcon thing to go through. We don't want it to expand. We love to go hiking at Crescent Lake. It's like one of our favorite places to go hiking, and it's really going to be negatively impacted by the explosions and the blasts if all of this stuff with Tilcon expands. In my generation, it's really existential right now. Like, we just see Antarctica melting on Instagram and Facebook, and it's like, and this is a problem that Netflix and chill just like doesn't solve for us. So we go to the woods, we go back to nature, and it reminds us, like, this is what's important, is preserving this, is keeping the life. It's really hard for us to find stillness. And I just think that the Tilcon blast should not be our call to mindfulness. That's all.
Thank you so much. Ms. Heap, Maggie Green, and Robert Mathis.
Francesca Heap, 25 Florence Lane in Plainville, Connecticut. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. The reason that I'm in front of you today is I have a genuine love of the environment, and that love led me to be, at one point in time, an inland wetlands commissioner in the town of Plainville. I was very discouraged in that time as a commissioner. that commission because I found that it was very easy to buy an expert who would testify on your behalf, and that usually the town, even if it was so inclined to fight an applicant's application, usually did not have the money to fight it. I felt that way when I was listening to the Leonard Engineering Report. Some of the things that I really felt were lacking in it was the mention of evaporation from reservoirs. Open surface water, heated by the sun, evaporates much more quickly than groundwater. And I really thought that was a really big point that should not have been neglected from the report. Also, open gathered sources of water are subject very easily to poisoning, intentional or not intentional. Another thing that I was concerned about, which I thought was very glossed over in the report, the loss of animal habitat increases the human and wildlife interactions, posing a danger to people as animals desperate for food and water move into their neighborhoods. Not mentioned in the report. Another thing I'd like to talk about also is that I raised this concern to two of my state rep and local representative in the town of Plainville, and I'm really hoping this has changed, but when I did my research online at the state level, I found that the mining regulations in the state of Connecticut had not been updated since the Great Depression. If you can imagine mining regulations that weren't even updated when the Clean Water Act went through, I hope this has changed, but I'm not sure that it has in the year and a half since I found this out. And I really think it would be grossly irresponsible to mine in a drinking water watershed, particularly if these mining regulations haven't been updated in almost 100 years. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Maggie Green, Robert Mathis, and Kathleen Smits.
Hi, my name is Maggie Green. I live at 158 Worcester Street here in New Britain. And I agree with what everybody has said pretty much, so I won't reiterate a lot of that. I do want to comment on what John, whose last name I don't know, unfortunately, said, and that's that I don't know if any of you have driven by Tilcon lately, but it's very ironic that they have a sign that says, "Shh, we have neighbors." You know, it's like, I am one of your neighbors. I live on the other side of the hill, and my whole house shakes a couple times a week. It shakes so hard that things have fallen off my windows. Everything in my china cabinets shake. There is a new crack in my wall from one of the blasts. In fact, it shakes so much that when people were talking about feeling the effects of the earthquake a few years ago, my nephew was saying, "Oh, I felt it underwater," and all these people are saying they felt it. And I'm thinking, geez, how did I not feel an earthquake? And then I remembered that was the day that I said to my husband, geez, that wasn't much of a blast. You know, the person who just spoke before me talked about the human and animal interaction. And that's one of the things that I have noticed a lot in my neighborhood. In fact, I've had deer come right down my street, which is a danger to both the deer, well, to all, the deer, the pedestrians, the drivers of the cars. And if a deer wasn't bad enough, just last summer we had this bear. And I'll show all of you because you can probably see that big black blob. It was about a 300 at least pound bear. And I'll send this around to you. Came down our street and decided to settle in the yard 4 houses away from me. Well, it made a great photo op, obviously, but it also made me really worry about letting my 4-year-old grandson run around in my yard too far from my grasp. So those are some personal ways that I've been affected. I would like to say, people have talked a little bit about conservation. There are things that we can be doing every day. And I say this as a gardener, and I know I do spray my garden, but I also, all through the winter, save every drop of water that I run trying to get my shower ready to be hot enough. I stick the milk bottle under there. When I'm running water for something on the stove, I stick the milk bottle under there. You'd laugh if you came onto my porch during the winter because it's full of milk bottles. And we can be doing very simple things like that if we're worrying about water. We don't need this hole that's going to be blown in the ground, and God only knows what's going to happen to us because of it. I'm very much against this proposal, and I hope that you guys will all vote against it too. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. Robert Mathis, Kathleen Smits, and Julianne.
Robert Mathis, 215 Worcester Street. Similar to where she is in terms of hearing the blasting and feeling it and seeing the results of it. I asked the council to let a building inspector come to the area of our neighborhood and help us to document the damages that we are experiencing. I was told by the mayor when I approached her about this, go to Tilcon. They're back there. Hello, Tilcon. I have damages to my property. Why won't you listen to me? I am angry that this company is so neglectful that they're making millions of dollars, and the end result is we suffer, and we suffer the damages. The second year I was living in the neighborhood, this past 4 years, I had to go to the doctor because I developed asthma symptoms. I also heard when we did a neighborhood walk that there were people up the hill, a mother, a father, and a daughter, all are being treated for asthma. We're east, northeast, and that's the way the wind blows. Terrible. Now I see many of you have plastic bottles of water. That's all you get to drink tonight. Don't drink any more. That's all you get. Tomorrow, go up to the reservoir and fill your bottle. That's the way it's going to go if we keep letting this community go the way it is. I was attacked by the mayor and her friends when I raised the question shortly after I had come here, why weren't we told about the drought? And I was told by the mayor, come and see her, she'll straighten me out. Well, I think she's been straightened out since, and the council has been replaced with several of you who finally are becoming more aware of what needs to be done to correct the problems that are occurring. We need to spend the money more appropriately than we certainly have been in the past. You are receiving tax dollars from us. Again, I ask you, help us to prove to the guys in the back of the room that we in fact are experiencing damages by them. I've only been told that there was one instance where the company acted, and that's right after a blast where a lady's front porch steps fell off. Pretty obvious that there was a direct correlation between the blast and what had happened. I'd like to ask Tilcon to tell us what they're doing in terms of remediation of the property. What are they doing to cover over the land that they have made bare, to plant again vegetation? What are they doing now? What are you going to be doing now? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mathis. Ms. Smits, Julianne, and David Benke.
Hello, I'm Kathleen Smits. I thank you for your time. I thank everyone for their time tonight. I live at 152 Barnes Street in New Britain. Those are my neighbors. I'm in the same neighborhood. I emailed you. You may have received my email. Thank you. I agree with just about everything that's been said tonight. I won't belabor any of the points, but I will tell you one more little thing about having Tilcon as a neighbor. We have a 16-year-old home that's relatively new. Our foundation is cracked in several places. Our walls are cracked in several places. And because of that, we complained enough that Tilcon came and put a seismograph on our front yard. We were not allowed to see the results of those tests. They were secret. That's all I have to say. I hope you, please don't let this go through. I oppose this vehemently. It's really not a wise thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smits. I have Julianne, I have David Benke, and I have Heidi Lagasse.
Good evening, my name is Julianne Tolston. I live at 74 Hickory Hill Road in New Britain.
I'd just like to start out by asking a question. Can you raise your hand if any of you have ever been hiking in the forest that we're talking about? Wonderful. So if you've never been back there, it is a treasure. And I'll tell you why, because it's literally my backyard. So I live on the outer rim of Hickory Hill Road. Just beyond my yard is the forest. That is the topic of our meeting tonight. I have 3 young children. They're 6 years old, 4 years old, and this one sleeping here is almost 2. We love the nature and the experience that we get living on the edge of this forest. It's very, very special to us. I'm a first-time homeowner, and I bought my house 2 years ago. When I was looking at houses, I had a choice. Could I move out to another city, another town, or stay in New Britain? We chose to stay in New Britain, and I'm so glad that I did. When we hike in the woods and the miles of maintained trails that are out there, we see red-tailed hawk, Jefferson salamander, coyotes, pileated woodpeckers, turkeys, black bears, deer, mallards, foxes. My kids can identify skunk cabbage, fiddleheads. They forage for hickory nuts, crack them open on the rocks and eat them. Whenever we find a stream, they'll take off their shoes and go wading in the stream. When I tell people I have this experience and I live in New Britain, they're like, no, they're pretty shocked. The forest we're talking about is the last great green space in New Britain. You get rid of that forest, I think that's kind of like the death blow to this city that I love and the city that I live in. So when my children grow up and they no longer see these wonderful animals and birds and trees, and we can no longer go hiking as we want to in the woods, I guess they'll have to come to you for an explanation.
Thank you, Ms. Tolson. David Benke, Heidi Lagasse, and Bill Shortell.
Hi, I'm David Benke. I live at 54 Victoria Road in New Britain, Connecticut. I came to this meeting open-minded, actually. I wasn't really for or against. I came here to find out what was what, because I really couldn't find any good information like in the newspaper or directly in front of me online, etc., because I live in New Britain, work elsewhere.
Mr. Benke, can you speak into the microphone?
But when I looked at the report that was given tonight, I saw other people have commented on it more eloquently than I can. Shoddy workmanship, not a full report, not good data. Mostly it pointed to the fact that we don't need another reservoir. But I can tell you, as I hiked that trail that runs through the area we're talking about, the Metacomet Trail, which is now the New England Trail. It's a landmark, national landmark. The things I observe. I've been here since 2004. I've been using that trail system since then. I go out there every weekend, sometimes during the week. Some of the wildlife I've encountered, coyote, black bear. I even saw moose one year, bobcats, rose-chested grosbeaks, scarlet tanagers, red-tailed hawks, broad-winged hawks, turkey vultures. What is a forest? A forest is basically lung tissue. The forest takes the air that we pollute and cleans it so that we can breathe it. You take away that lung tissue, sooner or later you'll suffocate. So you really need to protect what you got, because once you blow up a mountain, you can't put it back. So I would strongly urge that you listen to all the voices that you heard tonight that stand in opposition to this land transfer, and seriously consider what it will do to New Britain. That area of trail is also bringing income to our area, because there are many people that I meet on the trail that come from out of state, definitely out of town, some from out of country, to experience that trail system. So that's money coming into our economy. That's money that will continue to come into our economy long after Tilcon ceased to exist. So you really need to think it over long and hard and do the right thing, which I'm sure you will. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Heidi Lagasse, Bill Shortell, and Alicia Sharamut.
Heidi Lagasse, 25...
Microphone, please.
Sorry. Heidi Lagasse, 25 Oakland Avenue. I would like to start off by saying that I'm extremely disappointed with Mayor Stewart and her desire to let Tilcon mine our protected watershed area under the guise that we need a new reservoir. I'm also disappointed with our elected state officials for their yay vote on Public Act 1661, allowing the study to move forward, bringing us all here today. As we all know, clean water is vital to life and must be protected from potential pollutants. I want to paint a picture of the kind of company Tilcon is. Tilcon and their subsidiaries have a long history of being unkind to our environment. February 2006, the Department of Environmental Protection issued a civil notice penalty to Tilcon, New York for discharge of fuel oil from an above-ground storage tank system on their site. The oil went across the property and into a tributary, the Passaic River. Tilcon failed to notify the department and failed to remediate either the tributary or the Passaic River. After the department initiated the cleanup, Tilcon agreed to assume responsibility for remediation and pay the department for the cost incurred. September 2009, violations occurred at several of Tilcon's stone quarries and asphalt plants on the Hudson, located in West Nyack, Haverstraw, and Poughkeepsie, with violations ranging from dumping stone aggregate into the Hudson to illegal wastewater discharge, as well as air and mining permit violations. September 2014, there were violations at their location in the Bronx, New York. Tilcon once again paid civil penalties and agreed to strictly comply with New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. Tilcon did not comply. They were charged with failing to provide daily records of incoming and outgoing solid waste material. They didn't submit a plan and survey documenting the extent and volume of solid waste material stored longer than 18 months. They didn't remove at least 20,000 cubic yards of waste material that they were supposed to. The Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection lists a number of Tilcon sites as having environmental issues: Danbury, Granby, Hamden, Newington, North Branford, Wallingford, and Waterbury. These sites have been identified by the DEP to pose or have posed a threat to the environment or public health. Tilcon carelessly failed to monitor their underground storage tanks, and these tanks leaked hazardous materials. If Tilcon is allowed to mine our watershed, what is to stop them from polluting? This is our drinking water that is at stake. Protecting Class 1 and Class 2 watershed requires careful stewardship. We are going to continue to enjoy an abundant supply of clean water for future generations to come.
Thank you, Mr. Gaffney. I have Bill Shortell, Alicia Sharmo, and Justine Beach.
Hi, Bill Shortell, 947 West Main Street, New Britain. I'm also the chairperson of the Democratic Party here in New Britain. And I got to say how proud I am of New Britain, how proud I am of all the people that have been speaking here. People think of New Britain as a town that's, we worry about homelessness, we worry about, hunger, we worry about blighted housing. And nobody thought that New Britain would stand up for the environment like this, and it's been tremendous, the outpouring of passion about our environment here, and it should teach people a little bit about how broad and diverse New Britain is. But I got to say that some people are like painting the city with one brush, and that's just not accurate. Every Democratic elected official in New Britain is against this. Every elected Republican official has been voting for this, is in favor of this. Unless they want to change their mind right now, that's fine. So it's the same party that, the Republican Party that has, been climate change deniers and science deniers. It's kind of refreshing to see their bought and paid so-called experts here today talking all about climate change, where the party that hired them is against climate change science. It's really ironic. But I'm glad to hear, them talking about it, even though they're twisting it for the wrong reasons. So I just have one more thing to say. That is that we're trying to be a more environmentalist Democratic Town Committee. We want to have an environmentalist committee. And I have right here a sign-up sheet. I'm going to be at the door when people leave. Anybody who wants to get on the DTC mailing list, sign up. And we're feeding off the energy of the people here. It's something great for the Democrats in New Britain. And I have to thank all the speakers and all the people that showed up here. Thank you very much.
Alicia Sherimo, Justine Beach, and last name of Brodzik.
Hi, my name is Alicia Sharmat, 56 Francis Avenue in Newington. I am the river steward for the Connecticut River Conservancy. I am also on the Council on Environmental Quality. I was on the subcommittee that reviewed this report. However, I'd like to point out that I am not speaking for the Council on Environmental Quality. I came here to listen. I didn't expect to say anything. However, there was something during the presentation that I feel I really need to speak to. So, Mr. Erickson's presentation made it sound like this project is the only way for the city to build resiliency. The city of New Britain will not build resiliency when it does not focus on conservation and claims that the current water consumption of its customers is satisfactory and need not be improved. The city of New Britain will not build resiliency when it does not plan to reduce its non-revenue unaccounted for water loss in the next 50 years. The city of New Britain will not build resiliency when it's not thinking about other ways to prepare for drought. And other people have pointed this out, but the city's response and communications surrounding the recent drought should really be examined, because voluntary residential water restrictions began more than a year before Mayor Stewart and Governor Malloy stood in front of the nearly dry Shuttle metal reservoir for the press event. And Mr. Esponda signed the order to receive water from the MDC. Ask how much effort was put into informing customers that they should be conserving water for that year. Ask how strong your city's drought plan is. That's how you build resiliency. And I want to say, I'm not saying that this is what the city of New Britain is planning to do. I know Mr. Esponda, I know what he has plans to do, but that report that you paid for says that you're not going to do any of this to be better stewards of the water you manage for your citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Justine Beach, last name Brodzik, and then Gary Wall.
Good evening, my name is Justine Beach, 5 Osgood Avenue, New Britain, Connecticut, where 60 years ago when I was visiting my grandmother in the same house, we were encouraged to stand around the sink and drink good New Britain water because it tastes good, it was fluorinated, it was far better than the water in the place where we lived then. Well, I live in that house now, and it's got the same sink. And I'm very concerned that my great-grandchildren, when that reserved quarry is built, will not be able to stand around the sink. That their mother will be going, wait, the 1,2,4-tetramethyl cancer-causing agent did not get cleaned out of the water this week. And I'm very concerned that this project will destroy the high quality of water that we have in New Britain. I leave the very particulars to the 2 excellent letters that were written by CEQ and the Water Planning Council. They go over things in detail. I just want to emphasize that CEQ says, needless to say, the project itself is contrary to the long-established state policy of not allowing the intrusion of commercial activities into Class 1 and Class 2 reservoir watershed lands as protection for water quality for drinking sources. And the WPC found that the city's report does not substantiate the need for the proposed new reservoir, and neither did the presentation tonight by Mr. Erickson. It clearly showed that we will have in New Britain 50 years from now almost 2 million gallons per day extra that will be below the safe water yield. I sincerely hope that you will deep six this awful project that endangers the quality of our water. And if this project does go on and is considered by our legislature in the state of Connecticut, I hope any legislators that remain in the audience will vote against it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Beach. Ann Brodzik, Gary Wall, and Joanne Edmond.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Anna Brodzik, and my address is P.O. Box 2306, Bristol, Connecticut. And I'm fairly new to this type of meeting and environment. I just recently became a volunteer for the Pequobok River Watershed Association. My associate is Ms. Mary Ridings-Ward. She spoke earlier, and I wanted to continue in representation of the Pequobok Watershed Association and some of my own opinions about our watersheds in our state. I enjoy fishing and hiking and walking in the woods in New Britain and surrounding towns, even up in Wethersfield Cove. I tend to take a lot of pictures of a lot of nature, and just pulling out those fish out of the river is a lot of fun, and cooking them up later is very enjoyable too for myself and family members and friends. I'm here before you today to oppose the quarry expansion here in New Britain because it's a natural resource. It's ours. It's our water. We shouldn't have to bargain or use that as a bargaining chip down the line. 40 years from now, I might not be here. Maybe the trout still will be, but I won't. But if they're going to do this expansion, it's not going to benefit us. The justification of cost doesn't equal the gain. We're risking contaminating the water, the resources that we have, the trees, the animals, everything that I enjoy and everybody else that enjoys when they have that free moment to go out there hiking and fishing or walking in the woods with their children or your dog or just taking a ride. The proposed new reservoir, which the city's report claims would be filled with 2.3 billion gallons of water, may be realized as nothing but an empty cup. At a time when fresh water is becoming increasingly uncertain in supply and location due to climate change, and an increasingly competitive for-profit water market exists in our state, it's certainly unwise financially to put the New Britain Water Department's customers at risk of contaminated drinking water and Water Planning Commission's finding that the city's report does not substantiate the need. They don't support the need for this. If we don't need it, what are we talking about here? You know, if we don't need this extra reservoir, if we have enough for what we need, well then let's learn to conserve what we have. Let's use those tools that are sold in local hardware stores, one I used to work at for about 10 years, where we can conserve our water, where we need to fix the potential leaks in our infrastructure that's falling apart all around us. Let's put the money towards fixing the huge sewer pipes and the huge sewer drains and our potholes that are creating, you know, more runoff that go into these lakes and these rivers. You know, so I just wanted to come here and learn more, which I am, and to just support the opposition of not doing this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I have Gary Wall, Joanne Edmond, and Sylvia Halkin.
Good evening. I'm Gary Wall, President of Tilcon, Connecticut, 642 Black Rock Avenue. Since 1923, Tilcon has been a leading supplier of quality crushed stone, hot mix asphalt, and ready mix concrete. In addition to being a major employer and taxpayer in the region, we're longtime supporters of more than 100 local charitable organizations, including Habitat for Humanity, Hospital for Central Connecticut, Connecticut Breast Health Initiatives, Klingberg Family Centers, and many others. We believe there are numerous significant benefits this proposal would deliver. The first thing is the lifespan of the operation in the region would significantly be extended. This purchase would allow Tilcon to operate our quarry for an additional 40 years. We are proud to employ more than 600 people across Connecticut, with our Plainville and New Britain facilities serving as home to half of our employees in the state. We are also one of the largest taxpayers in the town of Plainville and have an annual investment of $40 million in wages and operating supplies in the region. Under the proposal, Tilcon employment and economic contributions to the region stand to be maintained for generations to come. Secondly, we will significantly increase the amount of open space in the surrounding communities. In order to mitigate the impact of the project, Tilcon has proposed 3-to-1 exchange of land. For every acre of mineral rights purchased, more than 3 acres of open space land will be donated to the neighboring communities. Under the proposal, New Britain will receive 41 acres of open space, 34 of which is in the Shuttle Meadow Reservoir watershed. Plainville will receive 171 acres of open space. 19 of those acres are in the Shuttle Meadow Reservoir watershed. Southington would receive 79 acres of open space land. All of this is in the reservoir watershed. In total, approximately 10 acres of currently designated Class 1 watershed would be eliminated under the proposal. Nearly 300 acres of the company-owned land would be donated as open space. 132 of this is located in the reservoir watershed. These donations would permanently prevent future development while protecting designated core forests in the Shuttle Meadow Reservoir watershed. Third, our proposal would mitigate the impacts of quarry operations on the nearby neighborhood. In the near term, under the proposal, blasting on the current quarry footprint would be less frequent as we progress to the expanded quarry area. Also, a new no-blast zone would be established in our existing quarry with no further encroachment to our neighbors. In the expanded area, 1,000-foot minimum buffer forested would be maintained from the nearest homes. In addition to receiving payment, the city would retain ownership of the land. When our quarry operations are completed, in an estimated 4 years, a new reservoir will be donated to the city of New Britain at no cost to the city and its taxpayers. This reservoir would serve as a water resource for both city and region to meet increasing water needs and manage future droughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wall. Joanne Edmond, Sylvia Hulkin, and Andres Ruiz.
Good evening. My name is Joanne Edmond, 166 West Main Street, Plainville. What can I say that hasn't already been said here tonight? Honestly, I am so impressed with the eloquence and astuteness and research that the people here have put into this whole project. I mean, you've done such a great job. They've covered every avenue, every idea. They've researched. They're telling you, have Tilcon can this project. You can't desecrate any more land. There's just too much at stake. The contamination of the water, the desecration of the wildlife, the plant life, it just is too much. But everybody's covered all that. I have, however, one little point that I want to make, and it's not little. Because of what they've done up there, they've come so close to that magnificent rock that is in my backyard that I walked when I could in my youth. Day gone by, that's for sure. When I was young and strong and climbed those mountains, which was so beautiful, and came and admired and loved that beautiful boy rock. Tilcon is so close to that now, and if they're even thinking of destroying that magnificent Indian rock, possibly tampering with Indian lore, because the Indians covered that whole mountain, that whole area. It's not going to be very pretty if there is retaliation with the Indian spirit. I don't know how many are into Indian spirit, but it is real and it exists and it's alive. And that whole valley could turn into Death Valley. That's maybe going a little too far, but I would say just can the project. Tilcon should can that project. They should just stop this whole thing, and it would behoove you to really listen to what the people here have said tonight. They have told you in no uncertain terms just exactly what they feel in their hearts, what has happened to their homes, their property, and I would say, please listen to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Edmonds. Sylvia Hawken and Mr. Ruiz.
Hello, I'm Sylvia Hawken. I live at 125 Arundel Avenue in West Hartford, and I teach at CCSU. I'm a biology professor. And I just want to give you a little quick, some things to remember about how, some of the terms you've heard today. Watershed is like a shed where you store stuff. So it's the forest on the land that's storing the water there. Why do you have to store the water? And it's stored by the soil, by the tree roots in the soil that hold the soil in place. You don't want the soil eroding into the water. This is the current reservoir we're talking about, not something in the future. And it needs to be protected. That's why the state has laws that protect Class 1 and Class 2 watershed land from having the forests on it cut. Because if you cut the forest no matter where, the soil's going to run into the reservoir and degrade the quality of your water. And I urge you not to try to circumvent that. You need to protect your drinking water, you need to protect my drinking water at CCSU, and if Tilcon tells you they're going to give you other watershed land, that land is already there with forests on it. They're not allowed to destroy land with forests on it that would allow erosion into the reservoir. So you don't need to get that land from them to replace the really vital land that they want to take away that would cause erosion into the current reservoir. So that's all I have to say. Thanks very much for the opportunity to talk.
Thank you, ma'am. The last person that signed up to speak is Andres Ruiz. Is Andres here? Mr. Esponda.
Yeah, I signed up. I don't know why I wasn't called.
Sir, I didn't. Come on up. But you're not on the list, sir. I would never have missed. I would never have skipped over you, sir.
Thank you.
You still have 3 minutes.
I just want to read a letter that I received from the town of Berlin, the Water Control Commission. Okay, it says the town of Berlin. It says the town of Berlin, namely the Berlin Water Control Commission, supports the overall concept of utilizing Tilcon's developed quarry and eventually increasing the storage capacity of the New Britain Water Department to provide for future demands. We view this proposal as a unique and a chance of a lifetime. After seeing the difficulty that Bristol Water Department faced in developing a new reservoir after the acquisition of property and later needing to drop the project entirely because of DEP concerns. Clearly, the development of a new reservoir in Connecticut is not likely and not a likely event in our lifetime. The increase of dams and storage capacities of existing reservoirs is also highly unlikely as well. This proposal would, in the future, allow the New Britain Water Department to double its storage capacity by creating a storage reservoir with a capacity of exceeding 5 billion gallons. Utilizing the Tilcon quarry would create additional storage capacity, which would be unprecedented in the central Connecticut Valley. It would make the New Britain Water Department a key player in providing additional supplies, not only to their existing customers, but Berlin, Water Control Commission, Kensington, and Worthington Fire Districts, and Bristol as well. The additional storage capacity could help the entire region, including Southington, Meriden, Middletown, and some additional supplies would be through Berlin's infrastructure. Most of us understand that climate change is occurring. We are experiencing longer droughts and more intense rainfall when it does occur. The Tilcon quarry storage would lend itself to flood skimming and water banking. During heavy intense rains, flows from other reservoirs will be diverted to the storage reservoir and be banked for future use. This is similar to the Lake Kennemore process with East Lyme Water and the Sewer Commission. The development of the Tilcon quarry would be environmentally sensitive, but could have a significant future benefit. We view this proposal similar to the Barkhamsted Reservoir and the Quabbin Reservoir, which flooded entire communities, but today rely upon to provide drinking water to thousands of customers. These projects during the construction were environmentally sensitive. However, will provide the Hartford and Boston area with adequate water supplies for years to come. We believe the environmental issues with the development of the Tilcon quarry water body could provide not only a valuable water resource, but could benefit the environment by providing a new water body. This deep water body would be less likely to be subject to water quality changes, and more importantly, because of its proposed depth, would unlikely have algae blooms issues, which shallow reservoirs often are plagued by during the summer months. In final assessment, we believe that this proposal, if well handled, could be an additional...
Excuse me. Mr. Esponda, 10 seconds, please.
Okay. We welcome the opportunity to support our comments and will be happy to discuss this in greater detail. Unfortunately, neither one of us can attend this public hearing. This was an unsolicited letter signed by Jack Healy, the town manager of Berlin, and Ray Jermima, the Berlin Water Control Manager.
If you would hand that to the clerk, Mr. Esponda. Is there anyone else who did not sign up that wishes to speak? Please come forward. Name, address, and 3 minutes, please. By the way, is there anyone else after this one gentleman? Because if not, we'll just motion to adjourn after this gentleman. So if you wish to speak, please get in line.
Thank you, Council. This lady taught me how to ride horses when I was 6 years old. She's part of my life. Dave Garuski, 17 Jude Road in Plainville, Connecticut. Willie, how you doing, buddy? I grew up on View Street. That was my playground. I heard some of you guys have hiked up there. And she spoke of the Indian Rock. Does anybody know what the Indian Rock is? No. I'm going to pass this book. I'd like it back because it's kind of rare. I want everybody to take a look. When you're driving down Route 72 from Bristol and you look up into the quarry from the Plainville side, there's a mountain up there. And it sticks out. It's clear as day. That's Boys Rock. I'm a 35-year member of Pequawba Tribe number 74, the Redmen, which is the oldest men's club in America. George Washington was a member. These are the guys that threw the tea overboard. I'm not a tea drinker, so I really don't care. They could have thrown it overboard. But this is how far back this men's club goes. That's Pequawba Tribe area. That's all Indian territory. They lived there. They grew there. This rock overlooks into Granby from Plainville. And I would gladly take anyone that wants to see this part of history to see it. It's amazing to take a look at it. I have found arrowheads up there as kids that you can tell clearly are Indian arrowheads. This land is sacred. And to have Tilcon just go in and blast it, they're about 300 feet from this head, and it's about to be destroyed. And that's what Joanne was bringing up, was the Indian head. And it's a part of my life, it's a part of my history, and if you've never seen it, it's impressive. It's about 80 feet tall. That was carved into that mountain by Indians. That's not man-made. You take a look at that picture, it's impressive. This book you can get on Amazon, it's about $6.95. Tells you the whole history of that mountain. And it's sacred land, guys. This isn't about Tilcon. This is about saving a piece of history. Tilcon could go across the street and get their stone. They don't need it from there. They don't need another reservoir. And my brother spoke earlier. He was the one that's got the water in the backyard. That's my mother. $6.95 tells you the whole history of that mountain. And it's sacred land, guys. This isn't about Tilcon. This is about saving a piece of history. Tilcon could go across the street and get their stone. They don't need it from there. They don't need another reservoir. And my brother spoke earlier, he was the one that's got the water in the backyard, that's my mother. 695 tells you the whole history of that mountain. And it's sacred land, guys. This isn't about Tilcon. This is about saving a piece of history. Tilcon could go across the street and get their stone. They don't need it from there. They don't need another reservoir. And my brother spoke earlier, he was the one that's got the water in the backyard, that's my mother. 695 tells you the whole history of that mountain. And it's sacred land, guys. This isn't about Tilcon. This is about saving a piece of history. Tilcon could go across the street and get their stone. They don't need it from there. We don't.